Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1317 of the War News stream. And today we have very big news that the U.S. has officially declared war on the South American cartels today and called them unarmed combatants, or armed combatants, actually. We've also seen that Finland is searching for missing NATO soldiers, and also Putin has threatened NATO with a new response after a very wordy speech today that was doublespeak galore. And it's good to see you all once again.
And, of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear significant developments from inside the Russian Federation and also the United States of America, along with multiple different areas around the world over the course of the day. We have been able to hear that the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, has made endless statements today through a publicized speech and generally a forum that was held within the city of Moscow about the ongoing situation with NATO, largely accepting the culpability of the Russian Federation being involved in the drone incursions over Europe, and also stating that while the Russians are not looking to strike NATO first, they are going to generally strike NATO first. We have also heard that they have continuously stated through the statements today by Putin that Tomahawk missiles being provided to Ukraine is going to be a significant escalation, and also that Russian forces are going to be moved to the Finnish border, although they already have been there for an unlimited amount of months, if not over a year and a half at this point. Outside of that, we also were able to hear that the President of the United States of America has officially declared war against the cartels today, naming them armed combatants, and also stating that further action will be made against all of these cartels within Central and South America. More importantly, we have been able to hear insider information from Washington, D.C. that is largely leading to give credence to the idea that the United States of America is not looking at an airstrike campaign in Venezuela, but is actually going with the original plan that I laid forward on the channel as slightly possible about a month ago, which was the idea of the U.S. military taking key ports and airports along the coastline of Venezuela. According to insider information information coming from Washington, D.C., it actually appears that that is the plan of action that is being pursued currently and would mostly be executed on if we actually start to take armed action on Venezuela's soil, either through airstrikes or through amphibious landings or airdrops. We have also been able to hear other significant news coming from out of Europe, as drones have been spotted over the airport in Munich, while at the same time the Polish declared an emergency today as a Russian ship is hovering over some critical Polish infrastructure inside the Baltic Sea. At the same time, a crate of 50 grenades was found inside of Malmo, aka Malmo activities, and we also were able to hear that the French President Emmanuel Macron stated that there was going to be a meeting in Europe about what to do with the Russian shadow fleet and the shadow tankers, which continuously skirt around European and Western sanctions. We've also heard of an earthquake breaking out inside of Iraq. It's a 5.1 near to the Isfahan area. While at the same time, the fuel crisis is continuing to grow, now hitting Orenburg, and we've also seen that the Ukrainians conducted a 1,400-kilometer-long attack into the Russian Federation, into the city of Perm. And I guess you could say that the Russians got a Perm today because that thing is smelling like it's burned. But nevertheless, we have a massive amount of news to cover today, and this isn't even covering all of the events and actions that have been heard out of the war in Ukraine today, and also all of the additional news that we have not been able to get to in the major breakdown of what we're going to be covering tonight. But of course, folks, I think that many of y'all can tell that today is another major and significant day of news. And of course, we're going to be making sure to get y'all through each and every single detail of all of this news, starting with our largest stories first, and then moving our way on into the smaller stories throughout the night. So moving us into the largest and most prevalent piece of news that we do have at the moment, we have been able to hear that the United States of America has directly declared war on the cartels inside of South and Central America. That was made by statements of the President of the United States earlier today, and according to the President, the United States has declared war against drug cartels. It was also further stated that they're now viewing cartel members as armed combatants, and will be treating them as such from this point forward. On top of that, we have also been able to hear that the United States of America's forced dispositions inside the Caribbean are quite significant at the moment. Just to give you all another snapshot into the area made by Ian Ellis on Twitter, massive shout out to Ian Ellis for putting together this information, we have been able to see that there's a large amount of U.S. air and naval forces that are within the area. Under the command of U.S. Special Operations Command is the MV Ocean Trader, which is currently moored inside of the U.S. Virgin Islands. While at the same time, in the Eastern Caribbean and at Puerto Rico, we have also been able to see the USS San Antonio, which is an amphibious support vessel. We've also been able to see the entire generally amphibious strike group based somewhere within the Eastern Caribbean or inside of Puerto Rico at this moment. We also see that the USS Lake Erie, a Ticonderoga-class missile cruiser, along with 4 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, a U.S. Coast Guard forward-deployed fast response cutter, a littoral combat ship, the USS Minneapolis St. Paul, and also the USNS Joshua Humphreys refueling tender are also within the area as well. Joining them is an entire flight of Marine Corps F-35 Lightnings, about 10 of them that are currently based at the Roosevelt Roads Air Base inside of Puerto Rico on its eastern side, while at the same time 2 P-8 Poseidons, 2 MH-60 Seahawks, several C-5 Galaxy, C-17s, and KC-46 and KC-135 Stratotankers are also involved in the operation, along with several Reaper drones, about 6 AV-8B Harriers of the United States Marine Corps once again, 12 MV-22 Ospreys as a part of the 22nd MEU, which is a part of the Amphibious Ready Group, along with 4 AH-1Z Cobras, or Vipers as they're generally called, along with heavy lift CH-53 Super Stallions, and 3 UH-1Y Venoms, at least from what we can confirm at the moment, and this is what we can publicly confirm, and there may be an even larger amount of assets, equipment, and firepower, which is currently within the area that we are not able to hear about here in the public. This is a fairly significant buildup. It's not actually that much larger than the buildups that we have seen or the forced disposition within the area that has been seen over the past few weeks, but it is a decent enough force. It's apparently a decent enough force that we have heard today that the United States of America, at least according to insider information, is actually preparing for a ground operation inside of Venezuela. According to the Washington Examiner, They have understood that military planners believe the assembled forces are now sufficient to seize and hold key strategic facilities such as ports and airfields on Venezuelan territory. And this is the direct wordage that was stated inside the Washington Examiner. Indeed, the Washington Examiner understands that military planners believe the assembled forces are now sufficient to seize and hold key strategic facilities such as ports and airfields on Venezuelan territory, withholding some details for national security reasons. U.S. control over such locations would allow for the increased sustained projection of U.S. military power into Venezuela from defensible positions. In short, at least from what we're hearing from the Washington Examiner, insider information is actually leaning into analysis that we made on the channel an incredibly long period of time ago. As a matter of fact, I was generally the only one making the claim at all in the world for a large part that the small 20-second MEU, which is equivalent to a brigade combat team in the Army, which is about 2.5 to 3,000 men, could be attempting to conduct an amphibious landing somewhere on the coast of Venezuela, supported by the aviation of the United States Marine Corps and other U.S. Air Force air support during that time. They could then land, securing a port and an airfield, create a defense perimeter around that area, and then pretty much further ferry in U.S. forces by air or by sea in whatever accordance that they would need to be able to continue any sort of offensive operations inside of Venezuela. So it actually does appear, at least according to some insider information that's been alleged to be received by the Washington Examiner, it actually does appear that they are going for the plan that I laid out, where they could be trying to seize ports and airfields along the Venezuelan coastline. Once again, I do not want to say that we have to toot our own whistle here on the channel, but the Enforcer channel did get that analysis put out well before any insider information was needed to get an idea that that was what we were generally going to be working towards. A little bit crazy to think that, you can just kind of guesswork that by common denomination and deduction of reason, but it does appear that that's actually what they're going for. A little bit crazy, I'm not going to lie, because that could get us involved in a fairly lengthy ground war in Venezuela while we're watching Putin today pretty much saying that they are willing to attack NATO first and are generally working towards that, and also the Chinese are gearing up to try and invade Taiwan as soon as possible. In the midst of all that, we are apparently going to try and actually physically land forces inside of Venezuela. And of course, we don't really know how that will end up going in the long run, but it is still a significant development nonetheless. We have also been able to see that the Venezuelans have tried to save face, at least in the meantime, while the USS San Antonio was photographed today inside of Ponce in Puerto Rico, which you can see right there. That's one of the amphibious support vessels that is a part of the Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group. Nevertheless, inside of Venezuela, we have been able to see that, according to the Venezuelans, they are starting to set up their air defenses. And I got to tell y'all, folks, I don't really think that they will stand that good of a chance, because one of the air defense systems that they had on the move today was a ground-based mobile target acquisition defense system, a TADS, which is on the back of this vehicle. You can see it right there. That's the TADS. This is a little antenna that actually pops up and then extends above the vehicle and is capable of detecting some targets at somewhat greater distances, but when I say greater distances, I'm meaning like 40 or 50 miles or so. On the front of this vehicle, on the actual launcher, or the Transport Erector launcher, are S-125s, surface-to-air missile defense systems. And these are quite old. These were put into service in the Soviet Union in the early 1960s and was actually around to at least be an existent weapons platform when Gary Powers was shot down over the Soviet Union in 1960 in a U-2 spy plane. So I would have to be honest with y'all. I don't really think, in my personal opinion, Venezuelan air defense would be that competent or capable. Also considering the complete lack of training that's been seen inside the Venezuelan armed forces, that also leads me to believe to an even greater degree they most likely would not pose that much of a chance, at least in air defense, which is the most important part of the opening of the conflict at the moment. If they are not able to...
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
I would personally say that going in, like, for example, if the U.S. decided they were going to invade in limited spots around Venezuela's coast, the U.S. would probably have no problem whatsoever pushing back the Venezuelan military, because obviously we can see their equipment is not the best, and also clearly the training of their troops is not very good either. They're in very foul shape, as we've seen from many different training videos. Many of them are actually very, very overweight, and there appears to be no proper standards to how their troops are functioning. So not a great army to start with. They still have big numbers. I guess you say, relatively big numbers of their troops that they have, but they're not well trained. But the problem will be, it won't be necessarily going in to take the Venezuelan land. It'll be holding it, because what is the U.S. expecting to do after we go into these areas? Are we expecting to hold it and take it and then overthrow Maduro? I don't know what the plan is. That's been my whole big thing the whole time, is what is the end game with this whole situation? We may be able to go in and take them down temporarily, but the Venezuelan military is naturally going to go to the perimeter of the city or into the jungle, and they're going to start a guerrilla warfare campaign against the United States forces, which is going to get us bogged down for a very long time. So where do you think they're going with that? Because so far the U.S. administration has been very hush-hush about it, but what do you think in your speculation?
I would have to say that, at least in my opinion, the ability for the Venezuelans to conduct any armed resistance for a long period of time against U.S. occupational forces would generally be minimal, at least initially, because of the lack of anyone's ability to provide any support to Venezuela. As far as countries are concerned within South America, rather than Colombia, most of them are generally neutral to the United States in terms of diplomatic disposition, and for that reason would not be sympathetic enough to be able to conduct any sort of supply corridor into the southern borders of Venezuela or its western borders to be able to help a country like China try and arm and support some sort of an armed resistance against the United States in the country. Not only that, but most of the country of Venezuela is generally considered uninhabitable by most. Just to quickly explain this to a lot of people, the Amazon is not just an interesting place, it is also a harsh and inhospitable place. Not really a lot of people can find it tolerable to live within the jungles of the Amazon, and on top of that, it is an incredibly treacherous and dangerous sort of a place. While Venezuelan resistance could try and stage itself inside of the Amazon, which is this southern third of Venezuela, not near to the coast, that would be pretty difficult because they would be so far away from any major roadways, or for that matter, any major cities or points of control. That resistance would be incredibly small in number, also due to their lack of an ability to supply themselves or arm themselves. The support would dissipate rapidly over months, and if there is no way or any country that would want to support them, or at least exist as a supply corridor for a country like China or Russia to try and funnel weapons into some form of resistance along with cash for them to raise an armed force, it would be pretty difficult to see a long-lasting resistance, at least inside of Venezuela, in my opinion. Because if we ever look at a situation where a country actually stood a chance against the United States and was continuing to conduct armed resistance over an incredibly long period of time, many of y'all will know that they always shared a border with some country that we were unfriendly with. In the example of Cuba, Cuba is open to the sea, and for that reason, the Soviets were able to supply and support the Cubans through the Cold War, at least to some extent whenever that was beneficial to them. In the Korean War, the North Koreans, at least in 1950 to 1953, and before that as well, were able to count heavily on Soviet support through their land border, and also Chinese support from late 1950 onwards from the Chinese. In the Vietnam War, the North Vietnamese were able to get unlimited support both from the Soviet Union and Communist China because of their direct border access by land. The problem with Venezuela at any sort of armed or effective resistance that would last over a long period of time is that armed resistance requires some level of funding and also some level of equipment to be able to operate. And considering that Colombia is the only country that is hostile, at least to the United States at this point that we can tell, and that they could also be swept away somewhat quickly or generally blockaded if necessary, and also that the Brazilians, while a member of BRICS, would most likely not want to position themselves in a hostile form against the United States of America because they have a somewhat significant trade relationship with us in terms of the exports that they produce and then ship out to the United States, meaning that we're important to them economically. The Brazilians would be hamstrung because of their economic position, and the Colombians would be hamstrung because by trying to support Venezuela, they could see themselves pretty much get the barrel of an American gun put in their face in the diplomatic sense for trying to funnel weapons into Venezuela. So I don't really think armed resistance would last incredibly long in Venezuela, and I also think that's why this is being considered so seriously, is that armed resistance would not be expected to last long. And I would also think that they're assuming that the Venezuelan government and military are fairly corrupt and generally weak as a result of that corruption, and would most likely start to crumble once any form of U.S. Force was seen inside the country. Whether that would happen, that's a little bit unclear. We don't really know how that would turn out, but I think that's what they're game planning right now that's making this look like a favorable sort of an action to take, although there's still a lot of variables involved in that where everything could go wrong, and this could end up becoming Vietnam 2.0 inside of South America.
I think that's why I'm worried about personally. I'm worried about it becoming a Vietnam 2.0 because with guerrilla warfare, you don't have to be the best or the most strategic force with guerrilla warfare. The whole point of that is to simply use the native environment, which the Venezuelans are very familiar with. They're familiar with this jungle environment, and the United States is not so familiar with that, kind of like the same type of situation we had in Vietnam. We send forces into Venezuela, and they probably will successfully take the cities they're looking to take. They'll probably take those pretty quickly, but the problem is all the Venezuelan military has to do is simply go on the outskirts, go into the jungle and hide, and then launch guerrilla attacks right into the city. So what that's going to require is a very large permanent presence of U.S. military forces in those cities that will likely be under constant attack in some skirmishes one way or another through these guerrilla warfare tactics. So the risk to me is getting bogged down. That is the big deal to me. We cannot get bogged down in Venezuela. In my opinion, if I was in charge, I would say that is priority number one. While we do need to address the Chinese influence that's creeping into Venezuela, we absolutely do not need to get bogged down there because the moment that happens, we are committing vessels, troops, ships, and aircraft to that region, and we can't just pull them away once a war starts. So we have a big situation popping off with Europe between Ukraine, Russia, and NATO. So you don't want to attribute all these troops to this one spot down here. Venezuela is not that important when it comes to the big scheme of things geopolitically. So I just don't understand it. I just don't understand it personally, but it looks like America is committing at this point because we've deployed a hell of a lot of assets to this region, like a monumental amount.
I would have to say that it is a decent amount of forces that are present in the area. But one thing that I'll also have to say is that Venezuela is not acclimated to jungle warfare like Vietnam. Vietnam is a canopy of rainforest. Throughout most of the populated areas of Vietnam, there are a significant amount of rainforests through different forms of tropical climates that are present. In most of Venezuela, at least where a large amount of the population lives, it's larger, more deforested tracts of land like these right here, which generally are nothing more than scrawl, is the best way to describe it. And about 80% of the entire Venezuelan population, on top of that, lives near to the coastline in places like Maracaibo, Caracas, and Valencia. Very little of them live inside of the rainforest. So if any resistance happened there, it would be of people who fled from the cities as the U.S. was moving in and then went into the rainforest. They would be about as inexperienced in that sort of a condition or climate as U.S. forces would be. And I know that some people are saying that the U.S. does train with the Republic of Korea and other forces around the world to be able to be prepared for jungle warfare, but I also have to remind you all that that sort of training isn't done for every unit in America. Those are done for units that are believed to be soon to be fighting or prepared to be fighting doctrinally in some form of a tropical climate condition. That isn't done for the whole military. So if you had to bring in a significant occupation force of, say, 200,000 men to hold this thing down, or an even larger number than that, which generally is mathed out due to the size of the population of a country versus how many occupants or generally occupiers you would like, at least by a figure. And usually the best running figure is one soldier for every 50 inhabitants or one soldier for every 20. That's usually where the golden range generally is. Although in Iraq it was 1 to 50, and that wasn't really the good one. Actually, I think it was 1 to 250, which was very bad off. But beyond that,
Yeah.
nevertheless,
Well, also by the way, because you mentioned Colombia there for a second, Colombia, for whatever reason, like their president is starting to go off the hinges. Like obviously, we heard the statements he made in New York just a short while ago at the UN whole situation, made some wild statements toward the United States. So whatever's causing him to go off the handle, maybe he's hearing or getting worried about the Venezuela invasion that might be coming up, and maybe that's pissing him off and he's going berserk. But whatever the case is, Colombia could be maybe a participant in the defense of Venezuela if they chose to do so. I don't think Colombia's military is very strong. In fact, I think it is rather weak. But at the same time, though, they could technically join forces, and Colombia could lend troops and equipment to help Venezuela in fighting off the United States. And that seems to be somewhat possible because the president of Colombia seems to be getting very aggressive out of the blue. So, we don't want alliances to start forming between these countries because one by one, they're not so powerful. But together, though, obviously alliances create bigger powers, and we don't want these smaller little crappy forces to team up and then start fighting against us in a larger way. That will even get us further bogged down.
I would have to agree. And I also see some people bringing up different sorts of variables. And I just want to say this really quickly, folks. Me and Enforcer Matt are both of the belief that conducting any sort of an armed action against Venezuela right now is not America's top priority. There are a lot of other top priorities that are going on around the world, like the Russian Federation, the People's Republic of China, and the sort of emergent threats that they are posing, at least within those areas. Venezuela can be dealt with anywhere in between now and 7 years from now, and it would be the same situation 6 and 7 years from now that it is at this moment. Nothing much would change. But still, if the president decides to take this action, and then the Congress decides to approve the action, it's good to explore the types of outcomes that could happen in this area, what may end up becoming a result, and what our plans or goals are going to look like generally inside of the country. And I think a lot of people are mistaking that. I'm not a political activist here, and I'm not going to sit here and not even delve into analysis because I don't like the idea. If this is what the elected president of the United States is going to do and the Congress is going to support him, which I would assume they would once U.S. forces end up in Venezuela, at that point we're there, so might as well talk about what's going to be happening. What I would also have to say to that degree is that if we do conduct an armed invasion of Venezuela, we would have to figure out how many forces are going to be inside of Venezuela for a while. To explain to y'all really quickly what the problem in Iraq was, from what we know in hindsight, the problem in Iraq is that there were too few U.S. forces, at least inside of the former Republic of Iraq, during its occupation after the invasion of 2003. Because of that, we did see that there were a large amount of forces like the Fedayeen, which were Saddam Hussein's personal bodyguards, that would end up raiding unoccupied or unguarded Iraqi armories and begin to equip themselves. Those people would end up being the very ones that would create the Battle of Fallujah in 2007, and also all of the other uprisings that happened within that area. Actually, as a matter of fact, for the larger part, you could say that the lack of a significant enough occupation force in the post-invasion Iraq after 2003 was actually the reason why the groups like ISIS and others started to form inside the Middle East, because of the unlimited flow of weapons that came due to the lawlessness, anarchy, and complete lack of control that there really was in post-invasion Iraq. So if you end up conducting an invasion inside of a country like Venezuela, there has to be a clear exit strategy, and there also has to be a large enough occupation force to be able to hold the country down, at least in any form of a relative sense. One big mistake that actually was made that a lot of people have really lamented on inside of Iraq is that local police forces were completely disbanded post-U.S. invasion in 2003. And while that was generally done for security reasons, because it was believed that these police forces may not be pro-American or aligned to the United States, considering they were all probably Saddam loyalists, at the same time, it's actually believed that that would have at least given some leeway that the situation wouldn't have been as bad. Also, on top of that, there just was not enough U.S. forces in the area to be able to guard sensitive sites and facilities that were laden with arms and weapons, the arsenals and so on of Iraq, and for that reason, it caused a great deal of unsatisfactory results. So if they do invade the country, the United States would have to put a large enough occupational force in the country that there's at least one soldier for every 50 citizens of Venezuela, or one soldier for every 20, and hold it down until an interim government is created, they appear stabilized enough, which might happen within 2 years, and then the U.S. forces could start to withdraw rapidly and then lead that interim government, which would now be the legitimate government of Venezuela, to do whatever they are going to do to maintain security and stability inside of their nation. We would also have to do some economic building and stuff like that. That's all generally involved in the post-invasion picture to try and make sure that there's also economic stability that won't lead to a rise of extremism. But all that stuff is all is occupational sort of stuff, not really dealing with an invasion. Still, nevertheless, a lot of people are talking at this moment about the United States stating that it is in a armed conflict, a formal armed conflict with the drug cartels inside of South America. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And also the possibility of a Venezuelan invasion, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So we are hearing today that apparently the U.S. has informed lawmakers in Congress that we are in a formal armed conflict with drug cartels, and does this signal a Venezuela invasion? So 44% said yes, it seems like invasion is imminent, while 31% said it'll probably be airstrikes first and not an invasion, and 16% said no, it's all a big political grandstand. So thank goodness the United States solved the war between the Martians on Pluto and Mercury. They made room for a brand new war down here in South America, apparently. So all those 7 conflicts have been resolved, let's add one more back to the menu because the U.S. is raring to go in South America. So I'll be honest, I'm not really sure what the plan is. I've been saying this and sounding like a broken record for weeks now. I still don't know what the plan is in Venezuela. I'm not sure if the U.S. really knows what the plan is either, but it seems like they are going for it. So they're putting the balls to the wall at the moment and deploying all the ships we got to the area, and they're going for it. So honestly, I kind of respect the enthusiasm, but at the same time, though, we do not want to get bogged down like we were in the Middle East for 20 years, or like we were bogged down in Vietnam. We don't want to repeat those blunders for the 50th time, and it seems like we're like barreling straight forward again. So I'm going to say personally, I would be shocked if they started an invasion of Venezuela. They have enough forces there to do it, but at the same time, though, it would make a lot more sense to do airstrikes first if they're going to do anything than to actually bog down forces there. So I'm hoping it's not an invasion. Me personally, I think an invasion is a very bad idea, and we're going to get bogged down. But, hopefully somebody's listening to that. I'm not sure if they are, though. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, generally, this does look like we are gearing up for an actual invasion of Venezuela. While I just had a record-breaking voice crack right there, it does appear that we are getting ready for some sort of an invasion inside of Venezuela. Everything seems to be leaning towards that direction, and also the fact that the analysis seems to have stood up now that someone has gotten some insider information from Washington that they actually are planning on taking a port and airport region or area of Venezuela to help with ferrying in more U.S. forces and expanding the beachhead from there. That would generally lead me to believe that since that analysis was correct, there most likely will be an armed invasion coming up at some point in the future. Is that a good idea? It could be. I mean, like, if we generally have to deal with this eventually, folks, sometime within the next 7 years, it's just that I feel like we're dealing with everything backwards at the moment, because right now our priority threat is the Iranians because of the nuclear weapons development going on there. The second major priority, which is right up near there next to first, is the Russian Federation and their ongoing escalations in Europe. And then third is China, because that is going to come to a head with the Taiwan crisis within the next 2 years. Venezuela can be dealt with in 7 years from now, and it would look the same as it's looking right now, at least with the situation that we're seeing at the moment. So I would have to say this isn't a great idea to do it now. We could do this 7 years from now or any time in between. And also on top of that, folks, another thing that's a little bit interesting is that the population in Venezuela is about 28 million. And I just did the math there really quickly. If we were to say that there was one U.S. soldier inside of the occupational force for every 50 Venezuelans, which would generally be the Grenada occupation model. By the way, let me explain this. The 1 in 20 figure came from our occupation of Panama after Operation Just Cause. During Operation Just Cause, there was one U.S. soldier for every 20 Panamanians. Inside of the Grenada operation, there was actually one U.S. soldier for every 50. And generally, the situation was held down well. We were able to maintain control, conduct our actions, and then exit pretty gracefully, and we didn't have to return in either one of those situations. The one situation, I just wanted to make sure that I was correct on this, and it does appear that I was correct. On Iraq, it appears that in Iraq, there was about one U.S. soldier for every 250 Iraqis, which is why things went awry. And if you ever go back and look at the occupational politics of what people considered acceptable and unacceptable, there was a lot of argument in the Congress about what an occupational force size should be, and it was actually decided that we were going to go with a wildly small occupational force while also disbanding the Iraqi National Police, and then just hope to hold it down, and then that went to crap later, and that's why we ended up staying in Iraq until 2011. So generally, if you wanted to conduct an action in Venezuela with an occupational number of around one U.S. soldier for every 50 Venezuelans, you would have to have an occupational force about 560,000 strong to hold the country down effectively during that period of time that an interim government is set up, and that could be quite expensive. And also, an interim government isn't set up overnight, folks. That could take about 2 years to get an interim government in its protoplasmic stage and then develop it in something that actually would represent a legitimate democratic government inside of Venezuela. So that could take time, and during that entire time, there's going to have to be at least 560,000 U.S. soldiers inside of Venezuela, occupying the country the entire time, holding down secure sites and critical facilities, stopping any potential uprisings that might be conducted or guerrilla actions by resistance, So that way, the interim government will be formed in a stable environment, will be able to stabilize itself, and then once we start to leave, it will be stable enough and be built on a well enough foundation that it'll be able to hold its own and won't end up becoming something like the Emirate of Afghanistan, where it collapsed after we tried to leave, or the situation in Iraq, where it's still generally unstable, even to this day. So that is a fairly momentous undertaking when you really look at it like that, at least on an expense and manpower side of things, because that's tying up 500,000 men in Venezuela if we want to do this effectively. So I would have.
True. And also, by the way, to address this real quick, because everybody always asks this, and I'll be honest, I understand why people are asking, because even though I've studied this stuff, I still forget from time to time. But people are asking, does the U.S. president even have the authority to do what he's doing right now? So to explain how this works, basically, the governing law around this is the War Powers Resolution of 1973. So that is the governing document here. And basically what that requires is the U.S. president must notify Congress within 48 hours of deploying troops into hostilities without a congressional declaration of war. So we did see today's October the 2nd, the president did apparently notify Congress that the U.S. was in a non-international armed conflict with drug cartels. He didn't say Venezuela, he said drug cartels. Apparently that's what I've read, so that's the way I'm understanding it. So I don't think it was specified at Venezuela itself, but it was a notification of military action. So technically, there is a 60-day limit. The military action must end within 60 days unless Congress provides an authorization for the use of military force or declares war. And obviously, Congress is the only body that can declare war. The president can deploy troops to an area where there's hostilities, but he can't keep them there for more than 60 days without congressional approval or a declaration of war. So it is legal. Like I see people saying it's actually illegal. It's actually totally legal. Now, if he keeps them there for longer than 60 days and he doesn't get approval, then that turns into a bit of an issue. But for right now, it is perfectly legal.
And I would have to also agree with that on Enforcer Matt. That is illegal, and that's been the ongoing precedent since the end of the Second World War. Since World War II, a war has never been officially declared by the U.S. Congress. None of them have been. The Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Operation Just Cause, the invasion of Grenada, the 1991 Gulf War, the in 2003 invasion of Iraq, in 2001 the invasion of Afghanistan, and the subsequent occupations. None of those had an official declaration of war by Congress. All of those were done through the prior described actions that Matthew just spoke about on how congressional approval can be given, and then it's practically a war without a declaration of war. That's how it works. I know that a lot of people like to whip out the political game there and say it's technically illegal, but technically it's not. And also everyone's been doing that for the past 80 years. So if it was illegal, it's a little bit odd that people have been getting away with that for 80 years. So I hope that...
Also, if Congress doesn't like what the president's doing right now, they can simply pass a resolution to require the president to remove those forces immediately. So there is immediate action that can be taken, but it requires Congress to take action on their part, which right now seems nearly impossible for them to get anything done. So, and also the government shutdown is also another big problem as well. But they technically could take action to force the U.S. forces away from Venezuela, but we're not seeing any sign of that so far. So the troops will stay there for at least 60 more days, at least in my opinion. But we'll probably see military action of a larger magnitude probably well before then. So it's probably just a matter of time, probably a matter of weeks, actually.
I would have to say it might actually be. And also, I got to say, folks, I don't know what it is with the Venezuela topic, but some people go crazy. Some people are saying, we don't have a democratic government in America. We do. I'm not even going through that again. A republic is a form of democracy, just like Maoism and Leninism are different forms of communism. We've been over this route a million different times. It is a democracy, but it's a constitutional republic, which is a form of a democracy. You can create a democracy in Venezuela, and it's based or modeled off of a republic system. If y'all do not know, because some other people also said in the chat that the United States has never been successful at nation building, and we have failed every time we've tried. I don't really know, but I think the people in Germany would disagree, because we literally rebuilt them after the Second World War in our image. If you look at Germany, they're called the Federal Republic of Germany, and they have states. And they have a federal government system just like we do. They were modeled almost exactly off of us. If you look at Japan, Japan was built by the United States after World War II from the ground up. We occupied Japan for 10 years after the end of World War II. We were in Japan occupying them up until 1955. We also built South Korea as well from the ground up after the Korean War. American nation building is successful, but when there is a well thought out and formulated plan, everyone thinks American nation building isn't successful because in the instances of Afghanistan at least, we went in not really thinking about how medieval a culture Afghanistan is because they live in rugged terrain where really no sorts of modern actions, even logistics, are possible. And we tried to implement a modern republic style government, which simply would not work. And then that failed, obviously. And so a lot of people like to say, because of that one example, American nation building has completely failed. And even still, I'd have to say on that argument, in Iraq, the government that we created in Iraq post 2003 invasion is still there. I don't know if people know that or not, but the Iraqi government that is in charge of Iraq right now is the one that we made in the occupation of Iraq starting in 2003 and going up till 2011. And that country is still around to this day, and while it's somewhat unstable, it still survives. So you could argue that that's a successful nation building in a sense as well. But I would say that that isn't really the greatest argument. I would say that Germany, South Korea, and Japan are probably our best arguments, and also some of the most economically successful countries on Earth. So generally shows the point. American nation building does go well when formulated properly and executed well. The problem is that I wouldn't know if this would be executed well currently, or if anyone would know how to do that at the moment inside of Venezuela. And generally we have bigger fish to fry rather than talking about the Venezuelan situation. But if it's going to happen, that's all of the information we would have about how it would turn out or what the variables would be, at least for now. But moving on out of that, and out of the Venezuelan news, it is time for us to get on into some more major news that has been coming out of the Russian Federation, because there has been a huge amount of news and developments that have been coming out of the Russian Federation over the course of the day, especially from their president, Vladimir Putin. And also, I see that Matthew has run a poll here and has actually asked y'all, does American nation building work in practice? And it actually appears that this poll is actually a lot more divided than I thought it would be. So Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so the question says, do you think U.S. nation building works in practice? And it looks like 38%, the most popular option, is that people said only in very specific places, while 28% said yes, it mostly works well, and 27% said no, it almost never works. And honestly, I would say only in very, very specific places will it work. It doesn't work very well in the Middle East. I think we found that out strongly. Most countries and most societies in the Middle East are not receptive to it because I don't think there's compatibility between the governance structure of the United States and the Middle East. It's an entirely different way of thinking. And when the U.S. tries to superimpose our governance structure there, it just collapses almost every single time. So the Middle East is one of those places it'll probably never work. Now, South America, you might have a little bit of a better chance of it working, but I'll be honest with you, I really don't support that in that area, because I personally believe that the nation building exercises that we've tried to engage in the past has a very strong chance of creating resentment in that society where we try to do that, because essentially what we're doing is forcing a certain governance structure that we believe works right on a different part of the world. So while I do believe democracy is the best way forward, and obviously capitalism is the best way forward, obviously I'm American, I don't think that works for every place. And some places, they want to go down the road of, let's say, communism. We know it doesn't work, but other nations have the right to explore that if they choose to, and they have the right to fail and also fall flat on their face too when it fails. So it works in specific places, but they have to want it. That's the crux of the issue. So I'm with the 38%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that I'm with the 38% as well, only in specific places and only in certain scenarios. And the United States has successfully nation built in the past because we worked with the environment that we were given. If y'all don't know this is actually something a little bit interesting. When we originally started to generally form what South Korea is today, we didn't form it as a democratic government because there had not been a democratic government in South Korea yet. When we created South Korea, it was a military junta and a dictatorship, and it slowly evolved into a democracy because of the sheer exposure that it had to the United States over the decades, which eventually eroded the dictatorships and brought forward the sort of democratic governments that we know of in South Korea today. When we reformed Japan, we actually brought forward a fairly democratic sort of a society because the emperor was only a figurehead for the large part, even before the fall of the Empire of Japan in 1949. 1945, we knew that there was at least a significant part or a significant ability, also due to the zaibatsus that exist within Japan, which are significantly large interest groups, to allow those interest groups to compete in some sort of a democratic environment. And that ended up being successful. We worked with the territory there. In Germany, while there had never really been a truly democratic form of government in Germany before, we knew that democratic ideals would work, especially with the significant denazification campaigns that we were conducting in the country during the occupation. And for that reason, in all of these different scenarios, we were able to form governments that not only lasted incredibly long, but were economically successful. If you look at any three of those countries during the Cold War, every single one of them was called an economic miracle. And every single one of them had the guiding hand of the United States behind them generally, either with some form of economic investment or nation building that happened to kick that off. And they all have done incredibly well since then. The problem is, however, is that when we work in the modern day, a lot of nation building isn't done off of formulaic plans, taking specific binary inputs and then giving binary outputs and conclusions on how to build something. In the modern day, nation building has become a very politicized sort of a formula. And instead of looking at it like, for example, in Afghanistan, very limited infrastructure, very low levels of education, massively different cultures, huge language barriers, even in a small area like Afghanistan, this would be more supportive of something akin to some sort of a military junta or a dictatorship, which doesn't sound great, but that would be what would theoretically work in Afghanistan. Instead, we try and implement a federal republic governmental system in the country when the country culturally and societally can't even support a system like that. It's just nowhere close to it. We would have to install some sort of an authoritarian government first, and then eventually through American exposure, that would create enough angst in their society through the uplifting of their nation through significant investments, the access to infrastructure, and also access to nationwide education. It would eventually erode a dictatorship away to where it actually would become a functioning democracy, much like it did in South Korea. But the problem is that everywhere we go now, we just try and slap down a federal republic system, which does not work in every single country. And at least in the terms of Venezuela, you probably would have to start off with some sort of a dictatorship, but it still had capitalist economic systems, because eventually those capitalist economic systems, like in South Korea, will eventually start to create their own interest groups that will naturally butt heads with the dictator that's in charge, and that will lead to the erosion of the dictatorship and an eventual existence of a democratic government. It'll take decades, but it will eventually happen successfully like it did in South Korea and other nations where we've done such a thing. But that, I would say, is the reason why there is a splotchy track record, at least recently, in most of the world on American nation building, because in Iraq and Afghanistan, we tried to implement federal republic government systems, and Iraq somehow actually made it work to some degree and is becoming more stable year over year. Afghanistan completely collapsed and didn't have a chance in hell of that ever even working. So if we go into Venezuela, we have to understand that going in, we cannot slap down a federal republic system in the middle of Venezuela. We're going to have to figure out what's going to work based on their culture, their society, what the past 70 years has looked like, what their outlook, at least as a society and a culture, looks like, and form a government that would be acceptable to them, not to us, and then let it erode
Honestly,
from there.
though, why do we need to create a government at all in Venezuela? I'm personally not seeing the whole point of that, because we can simply try to oust Maduro. I mean, Maduro is clearly highly aligned against the United States. He's clearly chumming up with China quite a bit, and he's aligning with this new axis of evil. So the current goal should simply be, if they want to get Maduro out of the seat of government, they can try to do that. But at the same time, though, I personally think the Venezuelan people need to come up with their own government. We don't need to be down there in Venezuela telling the people what they need to be doing with their government. All we're concerned with is getting China out of there. We want China out of Venezuela, and that's the end of it. And that's what we need to do. Anything outside of that, we're dedicating tons of resources to Venezuela. Why should we dedicate so many resources to fix Venezuela's government? That's their problem. We're just simply trying to get China out of the region.
But if you do that, though, like, here's how that would work, and this is how it always works. If you invade a country and overthrow the government and then just immediately leave, you've left the nation in a state of anarchy. The economy is going to collapse, crime is going to rise and become rampant, and everyone in that country is going to resent the United States far more than they ever would have in any other scenario. And that pretty much meant, while you went in to go and deal with Maduro, who's clearly pro-Chinese, you're going to make everyone in the process of doing an action like that, of just going in, toppling Maduro, and then leaving, you're going to make everyone in the country resent the United States to the point they'll never want to be pro-American. They'll quite literally bounce right into being anti-American and pro-Chinese or pro-Russian at some point in the future.
They might not like us, and that's okay. Like the Venezuelans don't have to like the United States, but the United States does have certain foreign policy objectives that we do have to put forward, and one of those is getting China out of South America. That's a number one priority. But at the same time, though, the Venezuelans don't have to like us, but they will respect us. So if they topple Maduro and they see how easily the U.S. was able to topple him through regime change, the next leader, even if he is a psychopath, will think, I don't want to go against the United States by chumming with China again, because otherwise the U.S. is going to come back down here again, send a couple of boats to the coast, and they're going to oust me next too. And they'll keep doing that over and over and over until finally someone learns and has enough sense to not chum up with China again. So the fear is a strong one. Like the mere fear of the United States showing back up again will be very, very strong, even for the next dictator that might show up in Venezuela. So I think personally it'll create an atmosphere of fear, which creates respect by default, at least on that one issue right there of foreign policy.
You know, honestly, if you want to do something like that, I think the best thing that you could do is just take out Maduro, don't take out anyone else, and then just tell them, all right, we're done here, and y'all go about forming some form of a free election here soon, and then just leave. That might be the way to have the least amount of action, resources, and manpower put into the situation, but get the outcome that we're looking for, because it would send the message that you're wanting to send. It would also allow for some level of nation building, and then eventually, hopefully, some sort of American economic relationship that would start to erode that into a fine functioning democracy like we've seen in other countries.
Maybe so, possibly so. It's just the Venezuelans right now are extremely poor under the current government. The current government has a very, very bad economic policy, and they've tried a weird version of like communism, socialism type deal. They're like sort of merging them together a little bit, and it's obviously failed terribly for Venezuela. So their natural ally is China, but they should have known, they should have enough sense, and this is how dumb Maduro is, that once he chummed up with China and started making that very public and also letting them get the oil out of Venezuela, that was literally like waving a flag and saying, come invade me now, USA, come get me. That's basically what that was. So he was a dummy that did that. And if the US teaches him a lesson, a very strong lesson militarily, I don't think the next leader is going to repeat that mistake, at least not for a very long time.
Maybe so. We'll have to see what we do, if we do anything, and how it will turn out here in the future. But still, a really wild sort of a thing for us to have to consider that at this point it seems inevitable from what we're hearing that the U.S. will conduct some sort of a land invasion in Venezuela. But moving on from that and into the rest of the news that we have for the night, we have also had quite a large amount of news from inside of Europe. We've had a little bit from the Indian subcontinent and the Middle East. We'll cover that kind of just skirting on through. It's nothing incredibly big. The Indians and the Chinese are starting to grow their relations again. This pretty much confirms that Modi is 100% leaning into BRICS at this point, and I would say that the United States needs to cut all ties in any attempts to build diplomatic relations with India from this point forward, as it does appear to be clearly hopeless. We have also seen that the Islamic Republic of Iran dealt with a 5.1 magnitude earthquake today just north of Isfahan. We do not know what that was for, and also I want to say that the Natanz enrichment plant is somewhere around right here, just about. So it's not close to the Natanz plant, but it's off in the central area of Iraq. And once again, what a coincidence that earthquakes happen near critical sites and installations of our enemies. It's like an act of God nearly, in how perfect these earthquakes end up. I don't even know how that works, but we'll wait to see what keeps on evolving out of these ongoing earthquakes. Anyways, with that, folks, it is time for us to start moving on into Europe. But before we do, I want to make sure that we get to chit-chat with a couple of y'all, at least for a second, because crazily enough, folks, we've had a peak viewership tonight of 17.7 thousand people, which isn't the largest night that we've had recently. Crazily enough, that's a fairly small night, at least for the past few streams, but still, I gotta say that that is a massive number of people, 17.7 thousand, and I gotta say that we are absolutely honored and amazed to know that so many of y'all are here watching this channel tonight, and if y'all have been enjoying it so far, please make sure to subscribe. We, of course, still have a lot of news to go. Pretty much the rest of this will be in Europe, and a lot has happened in Europe over the past 24 hours. But, of course, at the moment, I just want to thank you all for watching so far. I hope you all continue to watch, and I hope that you all also subscribe as well, because we are getting closer and closer to hitting 550,000 and then 600,000 subscribers here within the near future, and we would love to have you all join us. And so with that, it's time for us to take a little bit of a break and answer a couple of questions. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so our first super chat of the night goes to Bobby43, and thank you very much, Bobby, for that support right there. And we do appreciate that very, very much. That is the largest super chat of the night, and it's that support that keeps the channel running. We appreciate that very, very much. And Bobby said, I love the show.
Hey, and thank you so much for loving the show, Bobby43, also LC39A. And I got to thank you so much for enjoying it and massively supporting it, because folks like you help us to keep this thing running. It's the speech that is as old as this channel, but it is an important one, because folks like you are the reason why we are able to stay on air. You help us to pay our bills and focus on this as a full-time job. And I got to thank you incredibly for that, because we don't run ads or sponsors on these streams, and you're one of the folks who helps us to make this thing a reality every single day. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again for loving the show and supporting it so we can keep it running. And with that, we're going to be moving on into the next one, but a humongous thanks to you so much once again.
Yes, indeed. And our second super chat here goes to Kaylee McCullough. And thank you very much, Kaylee, for that $20 support. We also appreciate that very, very much. And they said, thank you both for delivering the nightly streams at the depth and quality that you do. And it's a rarity, not just on YouTube, but generally speaking. And I love the add less premise too. And it allows us to be proud to support. And thank you again. And also, thank you very much for the kind words, by the way. Very kind words. We appreciate that.
And thank you so much for the kind words. We love to know that we put a huge amount of effort. We put heart and soul into this thing every single night. A lot of effort goes into this, and also just a lot of reading and researching, which is what I try and do throughout the day whenever we're not doing anything else, which nowadays is a good bit, because the NATO force disposition map and the Russian force disposition map has pretty much been on pause recently, and also it's actually a lot. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for enjoying the work that we do here on air. We love to know that people really do get a lot of effort and value out of this whole deal that we do on every air on night, and I get on every show every night. And I also got to say that, folks, it is a tough thing to talk about the Venezuela situation, because there are a lot of people who are making this into as political a situation as the Ukraine war or the Iran war or any other war, and it really is something to me to know that we can keep pushing through and people still enjoy the show and support it, because y'all actually know what our show is for. It's for covering news and analysis. It's not for political grandstanding like a lot of people would do. Just to quickly say this for some folks, I know a lot of people are not a big fan of the idea of the U.S. going into Venezuela. I would have to say, personally, in my opinion, I would think that there is a good argument to do this, but not right now. Maybe 5 or 7 years from now, this would be something prudent to do. But at the same time, folks, this channel is not a political activist show, and I'm not going to go and start marching in the streets and hold up my fist and wave a stupid Venezuelan flag and start talking about how this shouldn't be done. I'm not like that. What we do here on the show is that we talk about what's going to be happening. If this is going to happen, what will it look like? What would be the best outcomes? This is a pro-American and pro-Western channel after all, and as far as it works, let me explain to y'all really quickly. The folks who may not know, let me cue you in. The president has been elected, and he is going to be the president for the next 3 years. Nothing you say or do is going to change that. Just like the last guy that we were covering the news during, nothing was going to change the fact that he was the president. So whatever actions he is taking, as long as they are supported by the Congress, those are the actions that the United States is going to take. So if the president is hell-bent and determined on invading Venezuela, even if all of us don't think that's a good idea, what would be the best outcome for the United States? And that's how we end up approaching the situation, because sitting here and just bumping our gums about it shouldn't happen and it's a terrible thing for it to happen doesn't really change the fact that none of us have a say in that, and that it may happen anyways. If you don't like it and you think it's such a bad thing, maybe you ought to vote a different way in the next election. Or maybe you voted the way you wanted to already and you didn't win. That's unfortunate for you. But right now, that's the situation we're dealing with, so we're going to cover it in that way. If we start to sit here and just start whining and doing the activism side of things, where we say that this war shouldn't happen and that one shouldn't happen and all that sort of a deal, and we just completely refuse to even analyze it because of that sort of a pig-headedness, we pretty much are getting into partisanship at that point, because in the past, we never said anything about what the United States was doing against the Houthis or in support of Israel in 2023 and 2024 or any other period of time. We would just talk about what would be the best outcome of the United States in those given actions and choices, and what would end up being the most beneficial for the country, considering we're in that situation at that point. That's how we analyze things here on the channel. So I hope that cues some people in, just in case you weren't familiar with that kind of a concept of just being apolitical and discussing things as a line of business. Because, like for example, like a car wreck, you may not want to get in a car wreck, but the person driving the car that you're in might end up sliding on some ice and ending up getting in a car wreck. It's a great thing to say that that car wreck shouldn't have happened, but the car wreck's happening and you're in it. So what would be the best outcome out of that car wreck that you could walk away from and say, that didn't actually turn out that badly, and if anything, it was all right, it was indifferent, or maybe it ended up being fine somehow. That's generally how we go about things here on the channel. So I hope that does address that well, and I thank the folks so much who really appreciate that and help us to keep this channel running, so that way we can continue to cover things like that on air, which is a fairly rare sort of a thing on YouTube, and I personally think of it as a breath of fresh air. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, oh my goodness, folks, it's dizzying. Someone said, rule of law doesn't matter to you, just whatever is the best outcome for you. No, I did not say that. That's putting words in my mouth. I'll address that one really quickly.
We got a poll on that. We got a poll on that, by the way, because there's a lot of people saying a lot of stuff in the live chat. There's a lot of different opinions running around.
Speaking of which, let's cover that poll. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the poll question says, should the U.S. oust Maduro, occupy Venezuela, and then install a democratic government? That is the question. Those three things, are you in support of it? And it looks like 51% said yes, while 49% said no. And I'll be honest, I'm kind of surprised at the split here. I was expecting a very skew toward one option and not the other. So the audience is almost half and half on this. I'm kind of shocked by that. So me personally, and this is just my personal opinion, so it's just my opinion. It's not what I'm saying they're going to do or what they should do, but this is my opinion. I personally believe the answer should be no. I don't think we should be trying to occupy Venezuela. I also don't think we should be trying to install a democratic government there either. It's too much where it's not our obligation to do that. And also, number two, it's a terrible time to do that as well, because we're seeing a world war break out in Europe right now. So why do we want to get bogged down in Venezuela? That's a huge part of it right there. And then number two, why don't we let Venezuela take care of themselves? Our job is to simply put forth our geopolitical objectives, which is to keep China out of Venezuela. We don't have to occupy Venezuela to make that happen. So I would say avoid that whole quagmire completely. We don't want to jump into that. We don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. And I would say avoid it. So Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be with a 49%. I would generally say that I'm not a big fan of that right now. Now, I would say if you asked me that question in 5 to 7 years from now, I might actually be a fan of taking that sort of an action, because everything that's about to come to pass should have passed by that point, at least from what we would assume. So then at that point, I might actually be a fan of that sort of an action to curb Chinese influence in South America. But right now, I would not be. I would be in the 49%. It's not a good move. We have a lot of larger fish to fry. We've been saying that actually on the channel, both of us in agreement, for weeks now, that this is not a good move. Right now, we're seeing that there's about to be a possible war breaking out in Europe, and we also see that the Chinese are about to invade Taiwan. Both of those are incredibly large situations, and also, by the way, got to add in the bonus point, this is really the most imminent threat of them all right now. Iran is about to create a nuclear weapon at some point here in the very near future, within at least the next 2 years or the next year. That is the most imminent threat. So if we are going to be going on any sort of a situation in a moment and going, let's divert all of our efforts and intentions and resources in one direction or the other, Venezuela is literally the last on the list right now. It couldn't be a lower priority if it wanted to be. It is literally the smallest thing happening in the world right now. And so while I have been analyzing tonight how that could go successfully or how the United States could get a good outcome, that still doesn't explain the fact that this is the worst time to make this action, and there are plenty of other situations that could deserve a great deal more American attention and resources and effort, like the Middle East, Europe, or East Asia, which is more important than Venezuela. So I would have to say...
And also, here's another thing as well. Levi Stratton pointed this out. He said covert ops can accomplish the same thing that they're trying to do right now with the guns blazing approach. That's what I don't understand, because in the past, it's been an open secret. The United States is into government and regime change by using covert forces to get that done. That's no secret anymore. People generally know that. They try to keep it hush-hush, but everybody knows, okay, the CIA went here, the CIA went there, and they caused civil unrest, and then the government got toppled, someone after that. So you see the cause and effect. Why does the U.S. see the need for a guns blazing approach in Venezuela? Because that's typically not the MO, the operating procedure for trying to institute regime change. That's usually not the way we've done that over the course of history. So, especially in South America, that's like a CIA hotbed down there. South America is literally like the festering ground for like regime change from the U.S. intelligence agencies. I don't understand why we're not using them this time, especially considering we need the military to be freed up to to be able to go to Europe if we need them there. So that's what I don't get.
And also, really quickly, I want to circle around to one more thing before we get to the last question of this question segment and then get back to the news. Someone asked, so you're fine with someone breaking the law as long as it's a good outcome? I got to say, I don't really like people putting words in my mouth. I got to address that one because I'm not going to let that one slide. Like, not taking it personally or anything, but trying to even insinuate that's ridiculous. The president going to war with a country like Venezuela is something that has been going on for 80 straight years. Full stop. Doesn't even need to be any further discussion than that. It has been understood ever since the end of World War II that the president can pretty much start a war, and as long as the Congress is behind him, it doesn't require an official declaration of war. The whole argument that starting a war with Venezuela is illegal and that the president can't do that and then get support from the Congress later is absolutely absurd because it hasn't been that way for 80 years. We're not living in the early 20th century or the 19th century where we actually worked directly to the letter of the Constitution in that regard, where the Congress had to declare war. Since the end of World War II, 1945, the president starts a war and then the Congress approves that war, or generally he gets pre-approval from the Congress in quiet, starts the war, and then he gets the public approval from the Congress. It goes one way or the other. So even trying to make it sound like we're just saying the president can do whatever he wants and be outside of the confines of the law is ridiculous, because it is actually within the confines of the law, as we have seen within the past 80 years. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in that specific regard, because that was a very absurd sort of a statement to make and try and insinuate that we support illegal actions of the United States, whether through the executive, the judicial, or the legislative. But anyways, with that, we are moving on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the news inside of Europe. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so this one goes to Robert Betancourt, who puts in a 20, and thank you very much, Robert, for that $20 support as well. And I'm going to paraphrase a little bit because it kind of gets a little bit political, but I can generally address the premise of your question. He's basically saying that the government shutdown right now, it could be telling halfway through the month because people might start losing benefits then, so that could be telling. But we don't really know when the government's going to reopen, by the way. Just speaking on that for a second, there's currently predictions it could last about 15 days, so halfway through October, maybe October the 15th is when it might end, but there's no telling. Like, nobody knows how long it's going to take. It's all up to speculation right now. And the last one, I think the last one was like 35 days or something. It was one of the longest ones in history. So if the precedents hold true, then it could be a pretty long one. So hopefully it reopens, though. I need the government to do some things for me. And right now they're closed, so that makes it very inconvenient. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta say it's wildly inconvenient. I'll be honest with y'all, government shutdowns are incredibly aggravating and angering to me personally, because it's ridiculous that they'll do that sort of an action generally because of pigheadedness from one end or the other or both ends, and then they just keep that going as long as they can. None of them end up getting hurt from it. They're all getting paid. Everyone else ends up getting hurt from that sort of an action. And I would wish, folks, that there would be a lot more accountability, at least on these elected officials, when the next elections come around by the public because of these sorts of actions. Government shutdowns used to be practically unheard of through most of early American history, up until about, I would say, I think it was the earlier part of the 20th century, around the 40s and the 30s. That's when you would, I think, start to hear of the first ever government shutdowns that were lasting over just several days. And now it's ending up becoming a fairly common norm that the government can be shut down for weeks on end or up to a month or a little over a month, which is absolutely insane. Hopefully the government will be funded here soon, and the Congress will pass some sort of a spending bill and get it back on the road, because it's wildly annoying, because, not to get into a lot of detail, more than we need to share.
Yeah, don't get into those details.
But,
don't get into those.
Well, I'm not. But the government, we require some specific services from the government that we cannot get because the government is shut down. So that is something that is incredibly annoying to both Enforcer Matt and me, and something that is just aggravating, incredibly aggravating. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and a massive thanks to you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running. But I would generally say it is aggravating for sure. So with that, it is time for us to move on out of the question segment and on into the rest of the news, moving us directly on into Europe, and specifically into Moscow, because we have all of the statements that the guy in Russia, also known as Putin or Pooty Boy, has made today inside of Moscow. I gotta be honest with y'all, they say that They say that the stuff that comes out of Moscow is something else these days, and I'd have to say it definitely is. First off, we'll be starting from the right and heading over to the left, because this is in sequence of the most recent comment, and then on the left, that is the oldest comment. So, starting here, we were able to hear that Putin did whine about the Tomahawk cruise missiles. According to Putin, or aka the Kremlin, if Tomahawks are supplied by the U.S. to Ukraine, then it will mean a new serious round of tension. If Tomahawks are supplied by the U.S. to Ukraine, then Russia will have to give an adequate response. And it wasn't really described what that adequate response would be. We then also heard Putin say in his own words that all NATO countries have been waging war against us. Instructors actually participate in the hostilities. I don't know what instructors he's talking about. I mean, we have some instructors in Ukraine, but all of those are in non-combatant advisory roles, and there has been no proof whatsoever of any of them being involved in frontline combatant activities. That is a ridiculous sort of a claim. We also were able to hear that Putin generally admitted in a sarcastic, snarky remark today that the Russian drones were over Denmark, and he stated, "I won't do it anymore. I won't send any more to Denmark, to France, to Copenhagen, so on and so forth." It was said...
Was he joking or was he being serious? Because I couldn't tell. I listened to his statement, like in the video. It sounded like it sounded like both, honestly. I couldn't tell if he was joking or not, but what do you think?
I think he was being serious, but he was saying it as a joke. Kind of like how he says it in a serious tone, but a sarcastic way. "Oh, I would never invade Ukraine. That would be ridiculous," like he did back in 2015, 2017, 2019, so on and so forth. It's a similar sort of a thing. It's pretty much admitting that the drones are Russian, but also phrasing it as a joke, so that way it starts to run people in circles of, did he really mean that, or was it a joke, or what? Because you don't say stuff like this as a joke on a public stage of, yeah, I won't fly a drone anymore, and just admit that it was yours without it actually being yours, or trying to make some sort of a deliberate escalation out of it. So that does appear to me to be some sort of an actual admission that those were Russian drones that were over the airspace. At the same time, we also heard that according to Putin, the seizure by the French of the Russian tanker Boracay was piracy. According to Putin, he just said that's piracy. Now, what I will really say is piracy, however, is the fact that according to the French, the Boracay was not flying. Well, the Estonians actually detained the ship because it was not flying a flag of nationality, and then the French also detained the ship because it refused to prove its nationality when inspected by the French and refused all orders. That in itself is starting to meet a pretty decent description of piracy, at least the alleged actions that were made by this ship near the waters or in the waters of Estonia and also in France. So I would have to say that it seems as more that be the reverse of piracy, that would more so be anti-piracy, what the French are conducting, if you even wanted to start to construe it in that sort of a regard. While that's also been stated by Putin, he also added, and this is one that just absolutely was stupid. According to Putin, he said, "But now the border between Russia and NATO has become larger," meaning Finland joined. "We didn't have any military forces in that part of Russia. Now they will be there." Now, this is just a bullshit lie, but this is the biggest one that I've ever seen, because as you all know, I was working on this map right here, the NATO Force Disposition map, and I was working on it, at least for the Leningrad military district first, and I gave up because the Russians are so damn disorganized, it's impossible to really figure out how their division-level units, or what they call motor rifle divisions, are actually structured, or really work. Because just in the example of the Leningrad area alone, they have two motor rifle divisions, the 69th Guards Rifle Division and the 68th Guards Rifle Division. One of them uses regiments, which are their equivalent of a brigade, and those are actually somewhat comparable, at least to the NATO command structure, because in the NATO command structure, we go from the army to the brigade, or generally from the army to the division, and then from the brigade to the battalion, and that's how it works. In Russia, it just is however the hell they want it to be. Because while this one uses the commands come from the army down to the division level, and then the division tells all of the regiments that are attached to it the orders, and then those regiments break that down to their battalion tactical groups, the BTGs, that are under their regiments. Oh, no. That's not the case in every single Russian division like it is in the 69th. In the 68th, they just have no regiments. It's all battalions. So, this division command is running about, I think it's something like 5 regiments worth or 6 regiments worth of battalions under its direct command. So while this commander in the 69th, just to explain to you all how complicated this is, the orders come down from the 6th Combined Arms Army to the 69th and 68th Motor Rifle Divisions. We're going to conduct a battle action. So the commander of the 69th, he gathers up his regimental commanders, and he then tells them the orders. And then the regimental commanders go to their battalions, and then they tell them the orders. So there's an extra step in the command level there, a little bit more autonomy, and it's not overly burdensome on the division commander to operate the unit. On the other hand, similar process in the 68th, exact same process, this is how it goes. The 6th Combined Arms Army gives orders to the 68th Division. The 68th Division's commander, the division level commander, gathers up all 15 battalions under his command. So all 15 battalion commanders, brings them into one room, and then manages all 15 battalions like a mega regiment. And so this guy has to deal with 15 commanders directly that are directly below him in his command chain, while in the 69th, he has to deal with only about 7 or so, if I'm not mistaken, because he only has to deal with his regimental commanders and not all of the battalion commanders that are also a part of that division or fall under the command of that division. It's insanely complicated how they work this. It's heavily disorganized. But beyond that, what is so BS about the statement that Putin made that there were no forces near Finland, but now there will be? Look at where the 69th Guards Motor Rifle Division is. It's near Viborg. That's about 10 miles away from the Finnish border. There's an entire division that is historically based in this area of Karelia, right near to Finland. He's lying out of his teeth. I mean, I literally mapped out these units exactly where they're headquartered and where they're at. That is a straight up lie. There's literally been a full division there for at least several years. Ever since the Leningrad military district was created in the earlier part of last year. So he's just flat out lying out of his teeth. If you don't need any proof, if you need any proof to prove that Putin is lying, this literally proves it right here. I haven't even mapped out the rest of the Leningrad military district, which also includes the forces that are up here at the Kola Peninsula, which there also is a little army corps that is up here. So there's always been forces in this area for at least a year and a half. And he's just flat out lying that there hasn't been any forces in that area of Russia for a while. They've been there for years now. But moving on from that, and on down the way, we also were able to hear this very cringe statement from Putin. And I gotta say, Alexander C4 did a real service including this douchey-looking picture of Putin to add to this quote. So
I'm telling you, man, honestly, it's perfect.
So here's the quote, folks, from Putin himself. 50 years ago, Leningrad Street taught me one rule. If a fight is inevitable, you have to strike first. Pretty much saying that he's going to attack NATO.
Oh, no, he was throwing hands in the Leningrad streets. I'm telling you what, he's from the trenches right here. Vladimir Putin from the trenches, you know. He's from Oblak, they say. You know, in Leningrad, they had Oblak, they had Garden Park. They said they call it Garden Park. They said, you got to go scrap in the street. Honestly, seeing pictures of how Putin was when he was young and stuff like that, I don't really know if he's went into many fights. He's kind of on the skinny side. It looks like he might have been maybe on the bad end of fights, based on what I've seen.
You know, let me go pull that up for y'all really quickly. Let me go pull up his Wikipedia. Let's see, here we are. There he is. So, this is what he looked like in the 60s.
Oh, yeah, he's from the trenches, man. I'll tell you what.
Also, Matthew, it just hit me when I was pulling this up. Doesn't he look like that food inspector from Ratatouille when he was a kid in the flashback?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. So also, by the way, folks, I forgot to mention to y'all, because of course, you know, like every U.S. president that's ever run for a presidential campaign, you know, they always come from a middle-class, hard-working family, you know. They didn't have a lot, but they found a way to get by and all that shit. So Putin puts out that story to all of his folks in Russia. But if you look at his early life, his grandfather, Spiridon Putin, was a personal cook to Lenin and Stalin. If y'all know anything about cooks, or cooks that are affiliated with the national leader of a country that's usually dictatorial like the Soviet Union, y'all would know that cooks are generally pretty cushy off, along with anyone that's surrounding them and their family. Because if you piss off your cook, he might poison you and kill you, or you might let someone else poison you and kill you. So you generally put the cooks in pretty good graces. So this guy, Putin, was born in a family in Leningrad who had a grandfather that was in the family that was a cook to the leaders of the Soviet Union. So clearly he's in a preferred family with elevated status in the Soviet societal system. Like, that is it. Like, and of course, Putin puts it out there like he grew up tough in the streets of Leningrad. Hell no, he didn't. No, he didn't. He grew up in a Stalinka in the middle of Leningrad, I would promise you all. And he had a silver spoon in his mouth and was living it up. I would promise you that. His whole family was. Because you don't end up being a cook to Lenin and Stalin and live in a shitbox. That doesn't happen. Like, that would never happen at any point in anyone's life that was in a position like that, in a family like that. In the Soviet Union, it would never. That's just stupid. So I gotta be honest with y'all, this whole thing is cringe. One, because it's absolutely stupid, it's based on a fiction, and two, also, it's pretty much saying that if he believes the fight is inevitable, which he is saying that they're in a state of war with NATO, you have to strike first. Pretty much saying that the Russians are going to strike NATO first, pretty much moving it from a fable to a reality that's what we're seeing right now. That's what we already know. He also called on Ukrainians to just run out of the country, just run out of Ukraine somewhere. So, you know, that's an interesting one. Nothing new there. But once again, the Russian-sponsored terrorism sort of a deal from Putin's level at this point. Putting Ukrainians in fear and just telling them to run on away. But nevertheless, a lot of people have been talking about these statements that were made by Putin today. And Matthew, what are people thinking about him? And what are you thinking about him as well?
All right. So we did hear today that during this very lengthy and very doublespeak filled speech that he made today, Putin said that Russia will respond to Germany, building its army to be the largest. And what do you interpret that to mean? So 53% said it sounds like the usual yapping that Putin always does, while 33% said he's planning to attack NATO, and 9% said he's preparing a diplomatic response. So I'll say it's not just limited to Germany. He was also making comments about the drone situation as well. Some people are saying that maybe he was joking about it, but honestly though, he may have said it like a joke, but he was very specific about the places he mentioned. He mentioned, I believe it was France, Copenhagen, and also one other place I can't remember off the top of my head, but he was very specific with all these places he was mentioning. So kind of an odd joke to make, very specific joke. So me personally, I think Putin came out today basically to threaten NATO, but also he threw in a couple of political things there as well to hopefully maybe hook, line, and sinker the U.S. officials again. He made some comments about the U.S. government, also about the war not happening if a certain guy was president a short while back. So it was a lame attempt to try to hook, line, and sinker the United States, and also at the same time he was threatening the NATO alliance in Europe. So that's what it was, and he was doing it in a very sly and very sarcastic way. So I'm with the 53%. I think it's the usual yapping. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I would be at 53%. He's just running his mouth like usual, kind of like the stupid guy he is. He doesn't really make that much sense. I would have to be honest with y'all. The one detriment of the Russians being a dictatorship with him at the top is that nobody in Russia tells him how cringe a lot of the stuff he says is. Like, you know, everyone has built up this bravado in Russia over the decades since he's been the president, or the dictator pretty much from the year 2000, that he's some sort of a grand chess master. He's just a wise eldritch being, you know, like he may as well be mythical. The reality is that the guy, he's just stupid. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. He has no clue on anything. Like, if you listen to him ever, like if y'all actually ever sit down and listen to him, he doesn't know a damn thing about anything. He's like any other dictator that's ever existed in history, like Ceausescu, like Hitler, like Stalin, like Mao. They are thugs that know how to blast someone or have them shot when they disagree with them, but beyond that, they don't know a damn good bit of anything else on how to run a country, how to administer it, what to think about, how to plan things, anything for that matter. I mean, the war in Ukraine is the best example of that, because he made it sound like it was going to be a walk in the park, and I mean, I guess if this park was in the middle of hell, it would be a walk in the park, but this certainly hasn't been a cakewalk for the Russians, and it's turning out to be a lot worse than they ever anticipated. So, you know, once again, kind of showing he doesn't really have a tub of bright ideas, I suppose. But anyways, while we're speaking of bright ideas, pun intended, we also heard that in the city of Perm today, there was a record-breaking strike that was conducted by the Ukrainians for the 1,600 kilometers, actually, correction, into the Russian Federation, which was in the city of Perm. And the Ukrainians gave them Perm. They hit a nice little chemical plant in Perm, which is about 1,600 kilometers away from the state of Ukraine. This plant produced explosives for the Russian army, and now it's on fire. So I guess it once was producing explosives for the Russian army, and now it is the explosion of the Russian army. We also got another picture of it here inside of Perm. And I gotta be honest with y'all, It's nice to hear and see that the Ukrainians are getting a pretty good bit better at conducting the long-range strikes. Once again, this is right on the foothills of the Urals, and they're starting to conduct strikes like these incredibly often. They've never hit into Asia, however, from what we can confirm, but they are literally on the very border between Europe and Asia at this point with their strikes, which is pretty impressive. So with that, it is time for us to move on down to Orenburg, because speaking of things reaching the Urals, the gas shortage is now reaching the Urals. They're out of gas in Orenburg. We're going to mute the drum and bass. We can see them driving through, though, and taking a look around.
Out of gas, you said? Like totally out of gasoline?
They're out of gas.
All brakes, no gas, I guess you could say again. I love that phrase.
Man, I guess you could say that they beat the brakes away. Man, I'm just kidding. I'm just playing. But beyond that, we can see them getting on towards the roundabout there. And also, once again, the news was covering they're out of gas. This was on Russia 1. That's the Russia 1 microphone right there, Matthew. Look at that.
Look at that. Look at these. Why's that guy over there on the passenger seat looking away like he's scared? Like, what's up with him?
He doesn't want to end up on a hit list. We all know that the Russians, they're scared of the whole FSB hit list deal. Oh, he looked back, but only for a second. He looked quite scared.
Oh, look, traffic. Hey, look, an infinity.
Oh. What type of a sling is that? Bro, that's that free Russian healthcare sling. That's what you get with free Russian healthcare. It's literally a fabric strap.
I'm telling you what, I can only imagine what Russian healthcare is like. It's probably rough.
Man. But you know, folks, sometimes, you know, some people make arguments against free healthcare, for free healthcare. One thing I will say, though, is that nobody ever used the Russian free healthcare example as a model for free healthcare, because apparently fabric straps is what they give out for broken arms. That's like some crap from the 50s right there. That's something you would see in like a Johnny Quest cartoon when someone broke their arm in the cartoon. But anyways, he's hopping in the car, all chill, relaxed. Oh, this gas station's just out of gas right here. This guy, he seems pretty happy about sitting in line for 5 hours. He's like, I have nothing else to do. This guy's like, I have a lot to do. It makes me quite sad. And we can see them showing the pump in a slow pan. 20 liters for 1,500 rubles?
How much is that in USD? How many rubles again?
That's like about 80 rubles a liter, just about, I'd assume.
How many rubles in total is it?
About 1,458 rubles.
Let's see. To USD. Let's see here. Oh, let me type rubles. It gave me $1,000. Let's see here. That's about $18 right there.
That's $18 for 4 gallons of gas.
That's pretty damn steep.
That's pretty damn steep, folks. That's steep. Like, that is really steep. Also, we can see a Russian beater out here. We can also see them showing the gas pumps again. And also the rising prices of fuel. Now this guy is standing in front of an exposed open-air fuel tank. The Russians don't put theirs underground. It's too expensive. I now feel like one of those North Korean propaganda things that they don't put the tanks on the ground. They try and blow their people up. Like, man. Oh, man. They put a little warning barricade there that looks like it was poorly built. But still, a very unfortunate situation. But moving on out of Orenburg and on back towards Europe, we have also been able to hear of other developments throughout Europe today. Breaking them all down piece by piece, we did hear that a Russian vessel was hovering over a gas pipeline in the Polish port of Skiesin, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is right here. Right there. We also heard down in Munich that it appears the drones responded over the airport and it shut the airport down. In the meantime, the French, through President Macron, have stated that the European military chiefs are going to meet over the Russian Channel Fleet and what to do about them. And I didn't really know if we wanted to include this news or not tonight, because I'll give a little bit of a preface ahead of this. Malmö, this Swedish city, is generally considered by the Swedes to be their version of Detroit to a degree. I've heard from a lot of of European circles, especially those in Scandinavia, that Malmo is known for a much higher crime rate, which generally means that it's reaching a somewhat average crime rate for the rest of the world, because we all know that the Scandinavian crime rates are generally wildly low. But there was a crate of two crates totaling 50 grenades that were found in some parked cars inside of Malmo today. This is actually what we believe to be a picture of one of those very crates with the grenades inside. I have no clue what someone needed 50 grenades for. I personally can't even come up with a reason to have one grenade, much less 50. But they did find them. The police did find the grenades. Nobody was hurt. But still a very interesting sort of an occurrence. And, so I would have to say, I guess that's just Malmo business. I don't know. Like, I don't know if that's a part of a greater, attempt to conduct armed actions or an armed insurrection against the Swedish government, or if this is just some Malmo crime stuff. If you'll know anything about European crime, it was actually somewhat common for British gangsters back in the day to actually bribe someone who was in the British Army back in the 70s or the 60s or even the 80s to some degree to get themselves a hand grenade, a live one. And they would just go around and they would go up to people and pull the grenade out of their coat. I've heard this story from a couple of British gangsters on documentaries, and they would hold the grenade in front of someone and say, "Give you all your money, or I'm going to pull the pin out of this grenade and I'm going to blow us both up." And so they would give over all their money because they wouldn't know if the guy's crazy enough to do it.
Matthew, for a minute there, I thought you were saying that the robber was saying, "Give me all my money." It's like, who's he talking to? What kind of robber is this?
Dude, the robber goes into a bank and what's the thing? I'd like to make a withdrawal, please, from my personal checking account. Man, it's like, that would be crazy. But beyond that, that's
Would
something.
you like that in 10s or 20s, sir? 10s or 20s?
Man, hundreds. I want to trace a little bit, but anyways, with that, that's a little bit of an interesting thing to share with you. Also, here's why I wanted to say that. It could be that it was a band of criminals that were going to pass these around for some sort of a petty theft racket going on in the city, where they whip these things out and tell people to give them all their money, or they're going to pull the pin on the grenade. Or it could have been a part of something far more sinister. We're just not really sure. But still, a pretty crazy sort of a thing to hear from out of Sweden, nonetheless. Adding on to the arms cache that was found in Finland recently, which the Finnish police have provided no additional details on since that happened. But moving on out of that, it's now time for us to get on into the war in Ukraine, which is still a great deal of news to cover. Moving us on into the Sumy front, which has seen an unusually high amount of activity in video and picture evidence, we were able to see the 225th Assault Regiment targeting and hitting some Russian forces within the area, hitting artillery pieces like the D-30s, and also some Russian supply trucks like these Buhankas, this minivan, another D-30. Just endless amounts of equipment.
Also, by the way, it says Mil Beta is not activated. Mil Alpha is currently activated.
Huh. I don't know what that means.
See, Mil Beta.
it's alpha chat hours here in the 225th.
Man, top tier alpha males. Those alpha males are just irresistible to some people,
Oh
they
my
say.
god.
Said nobody except for the cringe bastards.
Oh my god. That was so cringe, man. It made me want to throw up. But anyways, moving on from that, we also got to see the 225th conducting some combat actions. We're going to be muting that. They've got the trap remix out. But we could see them getting ready to do some business. They're getting ready to launch their Baba Yaga, and there it goes. I would have to be
also,
honest.
by the way, we got some breaking news after this clip right here that's coming out of Iran right now. Whenever you're ready.
Oh, well, we could actually break from this clip right now to get to that breaking news. What do we got?
All right, so let's break from this little piece of clip and footage right here and move on to some news from Iran right now. This is just coming out apparently about 40 minutes ago. We're getting word from the Iranian president, Pezeshkian, if that's how you say his name. He says, we have no choice but to move the capital from Tehran to the south of the country due to the city's overexpansion, water shortages, and ground subsidence. So basically, what he is saying is the Iranian president is saying, in other words, in translation, that he has derelicted his ability to take care of the citizens inside of Tehran. So he's going to pack up, leave the mess that he helped create, and move to a different part of the country country where he can take resources from another part. So, what a wonderful government the Iranians have right there. A new capital just dropped tonight. I'm not sure where Iran is picking for this new capital, but I assume it's going to be farther away from Israel if they can try to make it farther away. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, that's wild. I haven't heard of a capital moving in a hot minute. Like, so this is news to me. This is news.
It's a pop-up shop.
I mean, bro, they're gonna pop up a little shack down in like Chabahar somewhere and be like, it's the Iranian government. We're running it from the coastline. That is dumb.
I'm sure they got their order for like those like little temporary vinyl signs that businesses that are temporary will like put up on the side of their building, like to let everybody know that they're there. Like a vinyl sign, they'll put up like a vinyl flag or something like that, talking about new Iranian capital, like on the side of a building down there or something. That's a joke, honestly. What a joke.
You know what's going to be crazy, man, is that I would bet you money that they're going to move out of the governmental buildings in Tehran and just flip the open signs at the doors to out to lunch or something like that, and then just move on down to the southern part of the country. It's like, also, what kind of vote of confidence is that from the Iranian government? It's like, we're just going to leave all of the millions of people in the largest city in Iran to fend for themselves now that the water's run out, but we're all going to move the government down to southern Iran and leave you all high and dry, literally. It's like, that is not really a good move for a government to make that's supposed to be for the Iranian people, you know? A little bit interesting with that one. But once again, folks, I got to say, that is actually breaking news. You rarely ever hear of capitals of nations moving ever. This is like that time that they moved the capital of Japan from Kyoto to Tokyo. If y'all didn't know about that, Tokyo isn't the original capital city of Japan. It actually was Kyoto. And I believe Kyoto means something like Western capital, and Tokyo means Eastern capital, if I'm not mistaken. Might be wrong on that, but still, this is apparently going to be what they're doing. So I guess if this was called Tehran in the north, when they move it to the south, it's going to be called Teflon.
Maybe so, possibly. I was just reading here the article about it that apparently it looks like The Guardian put out an article on it as well. Also, excuse me, I'm about to sneeze there. Hold on a second. There we go. I think I'm good now. But the Guardian put out an article on it, and also some other outlets did as well. It's the headline says Iran must move its capital from Tehran, says the president, as the water crisis worsens. And down in the middle of the article, it says here that the president raised the idea with Khamenei last year and got a lot of criticism. Apparently, Khamenei did not want to move the capital from Tehran. But now the president of Iran is saying that the problems with the country that it's currently facing requires to direct the development path toward the southern part of the country, where there's currently no water crisis, because the crisis cannot be easily solved. So that's a hell of a mindset there. He's literally just apparently giving up on fixing the crisis, at least for him. He's just going to pack up shop and head out. So what an interesting government.
That's absolutely wild. I haven't heard of something like that in a minute. But moving on out of that breaking news, we are going to get back to our clip from the 225th. Oh, you see them continuing to target Russian forces, dropping some bomblets on them. And also, it's like, that's not going to happen soon. That'll take years to get done, to like build any significant government facilities that they can operate out of.
Honestly, he's putting the I in Iran.
Bro, it's that new product. It's flying off the shelves, literally, and away. But moving on from that, we also get to see more Russian logistics getting hit in the area by the ballista unit of the SOF. We can actually see the Russians here filming the refuse that's in this area of the Kursk Oblast. We also see them showing an interview as they're showing the road of death. But generally, the rest of it's just showing the same thing, and generally the interview. But I wanted to show you all that to show you all the destruction that exists inside the Kursk area. Moving on from that and down into our location unknowns, we also were able to hear that Medyar, the commander of the drone forces, or the unmanned systems forces of Ukraine, has stated some improvements to the units under his command. The Birds of Medyar Brigade will double in size and receive a component for deep strikes. The 14th Regiment has been expanded to become the first separate USF center. The K2 and Nemesis regiments have been expanded to brigades, and the Raid Battalion to a regiment. As part of the recruiting campaign, it is planned to expand the unmanned systems force to 5% of the total defense forces. So it actually appears that drone warfare and the drone branches of the armed forces of Ukraine are becoming a lot more fleshed out and prominent at this moment. We also were able to hear that according to the Financial Times, the Iskanders and Kinzhal missiles of the Russian Federation are becoming more effective due to the Russians updating the software, supposedly, in the missiles, which is allowing for them to conduct last-minute maneuvers before hitting their target, which which is making it more difficult for Patriots to be able to intercept them. I don't know how true that would be, considering that Iskanders and Kinzels generally are not made to conduct any maneuvers at all. They are launched, they fly in a very, very gradual arc until they reach level with the horizon, and then they fly to their target. So I wouldn't know if this is true or not. And also on top of that, Patriot is able to intercept fighter aircraft that are also traveling at sometimes well over Mach, and also are conducting high-G maneuvers. So I'm not really sure if this is an accurate statement, and I'll just leave it at that. So moving on from that and into our next bit of news, we also got to hear of a little ammunition explosion that happened in an unknown location on the Russian side. It was a little one.
Looks like a big one.
Oh, he's looking at that ruined building. Oh, look at that.
Oh, a bigger one.
And then, moving on from that, we also have another little clip of the Russian casualty report, which I don't know why I had that mislabeled. But nevertheless, we have been able to see that over the past 24 hours, 980 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed, along with 2 APCs, 29 supply trucks, 1 main battle tank, 12 artillery systems, 271 drones, and 2 MLRSs. Moving on out of our location unknowns and on into the front line near Seversk, we also were able to see more Russian forces getting hit by the 81st Brigade inside of Seversk, which we can see in this clip right here. There goes one. There goes another. Here comes some others. Here's a dirt bike. Here's an outpost. Here's another couple of outposts. Here's a bomblet being dropped right on the target. Here's one being dropped on a vehicle. On a house. On a mouse. On a Russian. I guess you could call this the House of Mouse. But anyways, they did take him out. Pretty good to see. And moving on from that, now the Seversk front and into Lugansk, we also get to see a truck on fire, which was quite a fire, honestly.
Music.
What the? But that fire is burning quite nicely, and you can also see that in this clip right here.
Oh yes, it's a burning on the side of the road. Look at that. It's a burning down some trucks.
I don't know what that thing was carrying. It didn't look like a fuel truck, but that thing was burning wildly, and I was like, dang, that is crazy. So I had to show you all that. That was a wild one. But moving on from that and down the front and into the area of Toretsk, we also get to see the Ukrainians, trying to hit some Russian forces, and the Russians trying to stop it from happening. Here's the clip. Oh, bliat, he says as he gets off his bike, running with the AK. He's running for the tree, the singular tree, with his shotgun. You can hear the drone flying right over him. He's running like hell. Pop off your shots with Pappy's shotgun. One shot, didn't sound like it worked. He's got one more round in this sucker. Can he get it? No. He did not.
My god! Like how the hell are they expecting to get that thing with an over and under shotgun like that? Like they only have 2 shots and then they got to reload.
Man, they thought blood was out there, young Paul, like it skeet shooting or something like that. But anyways, moving on from that and down to the Pokrovsk front, we also got to see the Russians attempting to hit a Bradley that was abandoned by the Ukrainians a while ago. There goes the first drone to try and hit it. It missed. It actually hit the street off to the right of the Bradley, so it didn't hit it. Here comes the next Russian drone. It's this one that we have the camera on. We are believing that it's a fiber optic drone because of the high quality of the feed. It's trying to carefully...
This is high quality. This is like 4K Ultra HD they got caught in.
Oh yeah, honestly, man. And we can see them getting ready to line up on that Bradley. The Bradley's been abandoned for a couple of days. Oh, there went another Russian drone. It also missed off to the right of the Bradley for some reason. So now the third time's the charm, folks. It's time for this. Oh, actually, no, the fourth time. The third time was not the charm. So now I guess the fourth time is the charm? I think this drone is going to try and hit it. Yep, here it comes. Is it going to do it? Is it? And boing! No, it's not. It bounced right off the net.
It fell like 4 times in a row, man. That's crazy.
I'm not going to lie, man. That last one, Like, honestly, if we could have an audio on that, man, that wasn't copyrighted. I woke up in a new Bugatti, like, as it slams into the ground. Oh, man, you do that on me every time, man. I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you. But moving on from that, we also get to see the Russian forces getting slammed in Pokrovsk. And we see one getting hit right here.
Oh, and a big smash.
We see one also getting hit right here as well. Looks like a pickup Buhanka, most likely. We see them also going for another one. And another one.
Also, by the way, the womp womp was not intended to you. It was intended for the Russians making the fail with the drone, just by the way.
Well, I mean, it's kind of weird that's happening every time I make a joke. But beyond that, we can see them hitting another Russian vehicle. And moving on from that and on into our next clip and further on down the line, we also were able to see a Russian shed that caught on fire as well. And muting that really quickly, I thought it actually wasn't muted. But we can see the shed burning right there. And I mean, that thing is cooking. And also, I think they might actually be towing that thing. I cannot tell, but that's the end of the clip, and still quite interesting to see. Moving on from that and on down the line and into Zaporizhia, we also got to see Russian forces being destroyed within this area as well. And we see them going for a Russian outpost there. And that's the end of the clip. But moving on from that and on down into the Kherson front, we also got to see Russian forces getting hit in this area as well as a part of the Coastal Defense Forces. And we see the drone slamming into the boat, bringing it to a dead stop. The Russians in the middle of the lake. And it also looks like one Russian is trying to go for a swim, or they're shooting into the water. I can't really tell. And we see the Russians still trying to make a break for it from the sinking boat. And that's the end of the clip. And moving on from that and down into Crimea, we also were able to hear of a significant attack inside the Crimean Peninsula, which also we do not have, unfortunately, any video or picture evidence to show of, but we will be trying to find that, hopefully, within the next 24 hours. But nevertheless, we are going to be moving on up to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here from this day of the war. And let me make sure really quickly that we have the English subtitles on. And also, he's made the speech in English as well, but we do want to make sure the subtitles are on, just in case if it's a little bit difficult to understand his English. But without further ado, here is the speech. Peach!
Peach!
Dear friends, dear leaders, thank you, Antonio, Ursula, dear Matt, everyone here, and I'm glad to see you all. Thank you for your support. I'm speaking to you on my way to Denmark. This evening, my team and I will be in Copenhagen, and for the past few days, our soldiers have already been in Denmark, and together with Danish and other partners, they are working on a shared defense system to protect against drones. And it's not just about infrastructure, it's a political issue as well. Russia is trying to go further. They always begin with hybrid attacks, and first it's something small, then something bigger. There is always a next step. That's why we need to act now together and with strength. I think all the leaders who already understand the danger and are joining forces, we need to build up our defense capabilities, and Ukraine can truly help. No country in Europe has more experience than Ukraine in defending against drones and missiles. I believe Europe will need to build a drone wall sooner rather than later, and drones are becoming a main weapon for armies and for criminal or terrorist groups. This is a fact. And another fact should be our joint readiness to defend our people and infrastructure. And the sooner we all implement the SAFE program together, the better. It can really speed up the idea of the drone wall. And we have to understand that the drone wall is not just about Ukraine, our neighbors, or the eastern flank. It's not only about our borders or our region. Russian drones and Russian threats are now a real issue for all countries on the shores of the Baltic Sea, and that means for all coastal countries in Europe. That's most of Europe. Today, it's drones. Tomorrow, it could be missiles. The day after, new technologies, who knows? And we all need strong protection, every country in Europe, which means all of us together. No country can protect itself alone. It's a big mistake, even if only a few still think this way, to say we don't have a coastline or we are surrounded by others, so we don't need to act together. Today in Europe, nothing about security is separate from the rest of Europe. And this understanding must unite us. We all need protection, so we all have to work to make the drone wall and the security guarantees for Ukraine. And other defense efforts truly work. And it gives all of us a strong reason to boost and expand our defense production, to build co-production projects. What does Russia want most of all? For Europe to be divided, to argue, to look weak. That's what Russia is counting on. But your support for Ukraine over these years proves something else, that Europe is much stronger than many expected. And the fact that we are standing strong against Russian attacks during this war and striking back fairly when they target our energy system proves that Russia is not as strong as it wanted to seem. So we should not be afraid to build our own security models. Security guarantees for Ukraine, once we make them real, will become a model of security for others in Europe as well. And we are ready to be a driving force of this process together with you, dear partners. The same goes for the drone wall. These are all parts of something bigger, things Europe truly needs. It's also very important to respond to Russia directly so they feel the real price of their actions. We count on the quick approval of the 19th EU sanctions package. It's almost ready. Now only political decisions are needed. I urge you all to support it. This will also help our relations with America and with President Trump. He wants to see that Europe is acting against Russia for this war. Strong actions from Europe will strengthen the US response. And it's also crucial that Europe limits buying Russian resources, especially oil. Putting pressure on Russian oil tankers and the money systems behind their energy exports weakens Putin and helps improve President Trump's view of working with Europe. So those who choose ties with Russia instead of America are going against both Europe and the US. We recently talked about this with American team, with President Trump, and we truly hope that guys from Hungary will listen to these shared signals from all of us. And we also talked about the frozen Russian assets, and most of them are still unused. These funds must be directed toward defense and Ukraine's recovery. The tools are already prepared, and now they need to be implemented quickly. I also want to thank every country and every leader who supports our defense through contributions to the Pearl program, defense packages for our soldiers, and funding our weapons production. This is a big help. Thank you, partners. I encourage the countries not yet in Pearl to join, please. A few more quick important points. You can all see that we are holding back Russian forces on the ground. They had big plans for this year. They wanted to take more land, but Ukrainian soldiers are stopping them. Even in the hardest areas in Donetsk region, our men and women are standing strong, holding the line and pushing the occupiers back. We are also striking targets deep inside Russia. And you have probably seen reports about big damage to their fuel facilities. Such strong actions should be supported by strong political decisions. Ukraine has finished its internal screening process for EU legislation. We did it faster than anyone else before us. We did it well, and we are fully ready to open Cluster 1 in the EU membership talks. The fundamentals cluster. We need real progress on this. And I'm not only talking about Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting the enemy. Moldova has once again clearly proven its European choice. And how many more such tests do we all need? Of course, we all also support the Western Balkan countries. They too deserve to be part of our common European home. Europe has to keep its promises, just as candidate countries do their part. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for invitation. Thanks again, and we are counting on results. Thank you.
And
Slava Ukraine.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1317 of the news from around the world. And that's going to be moving us on into the second segment of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks, is it going to be an incredibly good time. We get to talk about literally anything and everything in the question segment, except for religion, politics, climate change, or whether the A-10 is relevant in modern warfare or not. And of course, we're going to be making sure to get into everything else that isn't those four topics as fast as we possibly can. But we actually have one last poll that we have run that we have to ask you all about and hear y'all's input on. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so right now we have a poll running that says, should the U.S. give Ukraine stronger and newer missiles than the Tomahawk to strike Russia? That's the question. And 47% said yes, Ukraine needs better missiles, while 36% said no, the Tomahawks are plenty good enough, and 10% said anything is good enough. So right now we do not know for a 100% fact that Tomahawks are indeed being provided to Ukraine. We don't know that for a fact right now. It seems to be a strong likelihood they'll probably be given to Ukraine, but right now we have not gotten the official statement that Ukraine has received those missiles. So they could have been secretly provided, and maybe they're arriving there now. We just simply don't know. But on the topic of giving Ukraine stronger and newer missiles than even the Tomahawk, I would personally say that while I do support Ukraine, I don't support giving away operational security of the United States. Giving them any newer type of missile would be subjecting the United States to potentially an operational security violation, because if the Russians get their hand on one of those missiles, let's say one of them has a malfunction or is able to be recovered intact by the Russians, then they can look at it, examine it, take it apart, and reverse engineer it, and that would be very bad. That would literally give the Russians the blueprint to how that missile works, and they can try to develop counter defenses to it. So I think the Tomahawks are plenty good enough. If those are sent, I think that will be sufficient, at least for now. So I'm with it 36%. And Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that in my opinion, I would say that the Tomahawk is perfectly fine. A lot of the earlier block Tomahawks have significant ranges up to 1,550 miles. So I would say that anything more than that would be getting into the range nearly of an IRBM at that point. So I would generally doubt that they would need anything better. I would say that the Tomahawk cruise missile would probably be more than enough for the Ukrainians to strike and destroy just about any critical infrastructure or targets within the Russian Federation that they could think of. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, and of course, a fairly interesting question nonetheless. But anyways, it's time for us to get on into the questions themselves. So with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping back into our super chats once again, jumping right back into our first one. This one goes to Jenna, last name Tolls, who puts in a $20 support, and thank you very much, Jenna, for that support once again. They said the old George Bush special: declare group terrorist and skirt by Congress.
Kind of in a sense, yeah, I would have to say to some degree, but at the same time, you don't always have to declare a force as terrorist to be able to do something against them. Like, for example, the invasion of Iraq in 2003 was conducted against Saddam's government, all for the premise that they were creating some form of a weapon of mass destruction. And also, on top of that, you don't have to get a congressional declaration of war these days to go to war. A lot of people seem to misunderstand that a good deal, especially nowadays. You don't have to have a congressional approval or congressional declaration of war, at least, to go to war. You just have to get some sort of approval or general favor from the Congress, and the president can go to war anyways. It's been like that for quite a long time. As a matter of fact, if you look at any presidency since Eisenhower's, every single president has taken an action along those lines where a war was not officially declared by the Congress, but we still went to war many times over. So I hope that does address it the best I can, at least in my opinion. But still, a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and help us to keep it running. So a massive thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here goes to Arar983. And thank you very much, Arar, for that $20 support. And he said, if we invade Venezuela on a Tuesday, would it be considered Taco Tuesday?
I would have to say that, I guess. Like, I mean, maybe. I don't really think that that's a Venezuelan thing, but possibly. I mean, maybe it could be. Maybe we could make that into that. But still, a big thanks to you once again for support. Also, a pretty good dad joke, by the way. And I got to thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running and making this thing possible. So, a massive thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 20 from Jake Robinson. And thank you very much, Jake, as well, for that $20 support. He said, good evening, Enforcers, and all Canadian and USA viewers, and LOC.
Hey, and a big thanks to you for the support all the way from Canada. And I got to say, it's the amazing thing to know that Canada and the US continues to stay together like Toad and Frog and continue to work this thing day in and day out to make sure the news keeps coming and that the Lee Spring Army continues to stand strong. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die. And a huge thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've also got a $20 super chat from Barry White. And thank you very much, Barry, for that 20. And he said, boo hoo hoo. I'm just a fly. Oh man, boo hoo hoo. I'm just a fly who likes to complain about the channel. Oh man, because it doesn't fit my agenda. Oh man. What does the marmot have to say about that? Boo hoo hoo.
That's a good question. What does the marmot have to say about that? Let me see if I can get the marmot here up on air. And let's see here. It is the marmot. Hey!
Oh, hello there, Governor. Hello there, good sir. You know what they say about that fly? They call him Doolittle because he ain't do nothing. That's what they call him. They call him that on the regular. But anyways, what in the hell is that fly saying down there? What's he saying, eh?
Aw, man. I'm just sitting around doing whatever the hell I do. Aw, man. It's a tough life for me. It's a hard knock life with my 8 legs. I'm not even supposed to have 8. I'm supposed to have 6. But the guy who painted me gave me 8. Aw, man. But with that,
oh man, he's a freak of nature, Governor. He's a nature freak. He's got a little bit of freak in his blood. Look at that. He's a hot dog man. He's got an affinity for them hot dogs. And also he's got an affinity for having 2 extra legs too. It's a strange thing.
Oh man, I have an affinity for that glizzy. but beyond that,
oh man.
Oh man. But beyond that, that is Alan the Marmot. And I gotta say, a big thanks to you for the support and allowing us to have a little bit of an Alan the Marmot segment. It is folks like you who help us to have an Alan the Marmot segment and keep this channel running. And I gotta massively thank you for that support, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to inundate brand new members of the Lee Spring Army with Alan the Marmot, or much less anything to do with Lee Spring Army history or culture. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best that we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Hernan Mendez, and he puts in a $14 donation. And thank you very much, Hernan, for that support, and also a complimentary voice crack just for you. But Hernan said Venezuela is not just go. Let's see. Wait a minute. Hold on here. I think there's a typo in the middle of it. He said Venezuela is not going to be a second Vietnam. It's Panama 2.0. You are overestimating the capacity and commitment of the Venezuelan army.
Generally, that's something that I have been saying on air a good bit, is that it would be similar to Panama rather than Iraq or Vietnam per se, or Afghanistan for that matter. So I would agree with you on that, but still, does that mean that we should undertake this action right now? And I would generally argue that that still doesn't mean that we should take this action right now. We have to conserve a great deal of manpower and efforts for elsewhere, like Europe and East Asia, at least in my opinion. So a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running, and I would generally agree with you on that, though. Most likely, as far as fighting them, it would look a lot more like the invasion of Panama than it would the invasion, or not really invasion, but more so the war in Vietnam. But a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, something else that people aren't considering, I would still say the likelihood of this happening is still pretty low, but since China has a vested economic interest in the oil inside of Venezuela, and they're also investing in oil platforms and things like that, they obviously have an investment there. China could technically, there is a possibility, despite it being a small one, they could decide to intervene in Venezuela if they detect the U.S. is going to do something that threatens their investment. They could try to do that. Me personally, though, I would still say the odds of that happening are probably very, very low, because China has to physically go to Venezuela and take their military there, and they have to combat the U.S. directly. So is China going to pick a fight with the United States and go all that way to do that? I would say very slim odds of it, but at least it's possible, though, they could.
That is possible. I would say that the power projection wise, the Chinese really can't pull that off well, if at all, at the moment, but it is a slight possibility. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here goes to Robert Betancourt once again. He puts in a 10 this time, and thank you very much, Robert. He said, will dependents receive help for living if area is designated as a combat theater that the sponsor is in theater?
Do you know what that question is asking?
I'll be honest with you, Robert. I don't know much about government benefits and stuff like that. I don't know much about it, so I personally wouldn't know how to answer the question. To be honest with you, I think he's asking, will dependents of soldiers that are, I guess, drafted get some type of help? Maybe. I'm not really sure if that's the question.
I generally don't think that they do if you're drafted. I think it's much like any other situation. Whoever's drafted is getting paid, but everyone else is just kind of has to float their boat their own way. At least that's how it's always been for the larger part. So I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Kate Brown, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Kate, for, I believe, the second support of the night. Or actually, that is the first support of the night, actually. But thank you very much, Kate, for that $10 support. And they said, somehow you make the war news feel like a conversation with friends. Big respect for the consistency and the way you keep it real. And thanks for the laughs along the way, too.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I gotta say, a massive thanks to you so much for enjoying this channel. And thank you for saying that we make it sound like a talk with friends. That's what we're trying to do on this channel every single night, is make it a lot more approachable. And I'm glad to know that it sounds like that, because that's how we always try and come off on air every single day. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And thank you so much for the kind words, because that is incredibly nice of you to say. And so with that, a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And a huge shout out to Crispy, who put in a $10 super chat. And thank you very much, Crispy, as well, for that support. I do not see a comment attached, but we do appreciate that, and that does help to keep the channel running. And we also have a 10 from Arable, who said, sending support from Yellowknife, NWT Canada, and LSA.
The Northwest Territory. Holy moly. Yup. One second, I'm about to... Okay, I avoided sneezing. Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories. Holy smokes, this is in the middle of nowhere. Like, actually, it literally is. Look at that, folks. There's nothing around here. Like, there's some smaller towns, but it's just wilderness out here. You know, this is actually the part of Canada that most people don't live in. And a lot of people say that there's a housing crisis in Canada. And my counter is, why don't they just build where the people aren't? Why not, why not build in the Northwest Territories? Everyone knows the realistic answer as to why that's not going to happen is because this place is largely inhospitable. But still, really crazy to hear that you're in Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories in this place. Let's take a look at it. Ah, the Aurora Borealis.
Gotta love that. Gotta love those lights. I'm telling you, gotta love them.
What is that coming from your kitchen? The Aurora Borealis? At this day, at this time, in this house, entirely localized within your kitchen? Yes. Can I see? No. Like, it's the Aurora. Huh?
They call her Aurora, Aurora Borealis. They said, I looked out the window and I saw dancing lights, and I said, hey, Jack, you got a stack of ones? I'm trying to give them something. And they told me, no, that's not the way it works. They're not that type of dancing. Oh, man, I'm telling you, come on, man.
Oh man, you remember it, don't you? About the endless Aurora Borealis Club, the way the Aurora on that Borealis, or anyway. But beyond that, actually, those are actually really nice. I was actually thinking it was going to look like something in the Antarctic. Usually, like the building, or the buildings, plural, are usually made in a specific sort of a way when you start to get incredibly far north around the whole of the world. And these buildings do look incredibly insulated. Like, the windows are quite small on most of them. But not that bad, really. And also, look at that, Matthew. It's a literal houseboat over there. It's literally like a barge with a house on top of it.
Listen, if you want to be on the water and you want to live on the water, put a house in the boat. That's what they told me.
You got a houseboat. Look, are you okay? Are you all right? Look, you got to ask the real questions. The place
I
is...
didn't like corn pop with those straight.
Did you just mention corn pop?
I used to bang them on the curb and put them in the rain barrel. You know what I'm talking about?
He used to mess around with a straight razor. They told me that he'd give you a clean shave, Gillette, and Barbasol, the grocery store, and a kid asking about a man on the moon or an alien or something. Oh my god, man, that clip was hilarious. But beyond that, this place is really cool. Let's see if we can get a street view. Also, what is this? Pud Lake. Wow, that's where the puds hang out. That's where the puds hang out. It's at Pud Lake. But let's see. Let's drop down. Is there? Oh my goodness, there is street view out here. Oh, that is insane. Let's see.
That is crazy. Let's see what it looks like. Oh look, it's like a movie set.
Dude, it's like a real city. I was actually expecting, I'm not gonna lie, I was expecting this place to look like the Nordic cities that are up near the Arctic Circle. I was actually expecting that. This technically isn't in the Arctic Circle. It's still a bit of ways away from that. But crazy to see. It's just like a normal city off here in the middle of nowhere in the Northwest Territory.
That is kind of crazy. It looks extremely clean. Like it looks like that Truman Show almost, how clean it is. It looks fake.
Yeah, what does it look like outside of the city on the roads leading in? Huh. Wow, they got like a big highway, and it's not, actually, this is pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. This was taken in 2009, though, so the street view hasn't been back since then. Also, what does that sign say? Zooming cement trucks on roads. That's a cool sign. I don't know why they have zooming cement trucks. What does that sign say? Two lines come together. That's like, I don't know what that means.
They say it's merging, going into one and stuff, and it's something like that.
If you couldn't tell, the 4 lanes are turning into 2. Don't you remember in LA the endless 2-lane merges and the 24-hour constant merging? Like, don't you remember? But how in the world do you even get to Yellowknife? Let's see, this highway goes quite a distance around that lake. and then it comes down here, and then it goes further down to high level, and that's the first place that you can turn to go here, and that's all the way in North Alberta.
That is crazy. Also, by the way, I'm sorry I'm laughing so much. I'm just thinking about a clip. We saw a clip of the guy we're imitating today, and he said something I never heard him say in my entire life. I'd never even heard him say this, like even in real life during these town halls this guy did. It was a politician, by the way. He made the wildest statement. I don't want to repeat it. It was just too profane to say it here on the air, but I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God.
Honestly, folks, the last president and the current president, if you remove the politics from the whole thing and you just listen to them, it's like a comedy routine, both of them in a different way. And
I can say one part of it. The one part of it, he's the first part I can't say, but he's like, "Hey, come on, Jack, come on, Jack. I mean, can't you remember the days of round the clock sex? I mean, come on." It's like, what the hell are you
Anyway,
talking about? Like, what is he yapping about?
he sat there. He said, "Don't you know about those bathhouses and the endless sex?" Like, it's like, what the hell is this? It's like, what did that mean? What did that mean? Who in the world remembers that? Like, I don't. I don't remember. Also, by the way, man, it was a little bit interesting that he said that. Like, don't you remember? To someone who is in like that kind of category. It's like, what the hell do you mean by that? To him specifically.
I don't know what the hell he meant. Honestly, it was wild.
I don't even know. I was like, what in the hell? But you know, it was that last administration. The current administration is full of crazy stuff and it's hilarious. But the last administration was also full of crazy stuff that was hilarious as well. The last administration though, it was just the nonsensicalness of it. Like honestly, man, I would say that most of the statements made, it was like an ongoing AI made shit post. Like that's what it was. Like everything was like, look, you go to Spokane and the potatoes and Mr. Potato Head, and look, the children they love Mr. Potato Head. Anyway, a lot of kids, they talk about McDonald's fries, something like that. And when you go to the grocery store, the man on the moon or the alien or whatever. Like, it's just an endless string every single time. It's like you had to piece together what it was.
I'll tell you what, if you want to have the best odds getting elected in the modern era for politics, you got to be a little insane. If you're the more insane you are, the better chance you have of winning. The more manic and insane you are. If you have a side of dementia too, that kind of helps as well. So I mean, if you want to like just like put a mash up pot of all these bad symptoms and put them up for election, that's probably your best candidate.
Also, someone asked, what is hilarious about the current? Oh, come on. Come on. You don't even have to look far. Like, we literally did, like, a whole skit on it the other day. Like, look at that stealth battleship. It's ugly looking. We need to return to the Iowa class because they don't look like they took Tylenol, Like, it's like an endless stream of comedy. Like, all of it is. Like, if you remove the political side and the actual impact of any of these people doing anything, and you just look at what they're saying, it's hilarious. It's just objectionably, like, hilarious. Anyone could agree. It's like living in a satire, like in the current administration, the prior one, like how they act, what they say, what they do. I mean, it's endless. You can literally come up with endless comedy routines from the past 8 years about, and they would be gold. Like you could literally just get clips of them saying stuff and it would be gold. Like people already do that and they get like millions of views because it's hilarious.
The crazy thing is I watched earlier today, I watched a little short 60 Minutes episode about Jerry Seinfeld, about why Seinfeld worked as a show. And he was talking about how unlikable or generally how like not good the three characters were, the supporting characters like Kramer, the woman character, I can't remember her name, and also George Costanza. All three of them were generally not supposed to be likable as they wrote them. But Seinfeld was asked, why did people like them so much? Why did people relate with them? He said it's simply because they were funny. Honestly, he was right. It's like these days, all you have to be to like get the popular opinion these days as a politician is simply to be funny. You can be the most like narcissistic psychopath that has ever existed in human history, and you can still get elected as long as you have a good joke in your system a certain day when you're making a speech. If you can lob some jokes out there, that covers all that other crazy stuff up.
But I mean, at the same time, though, like all those characters were liked because, while they were douchebags, they were douchebags in a funny way. I think that's always going to be the case. Because if you ever look back in history, the guy who ended up getting all of those Union prisoners of war being released, killed on the Sultana, he was just charismatic. So, like, everyone was like, oh, he's fine. Like, he got away with loads of scandals and scams back in the day as an officer in the Union Army. And everyone just kept letting him get by because he was a little charismatic. Like, literally everyone. So, like, I think that's kind of the case. As long as you can end up coming off as funny and make people laugh, you can kind of get away with whatever you want.
Yeah, to a certain degree, as long as it's not something that's like a blatant violation of the law. If you wanted to blatantly violate the law, you got to have people in the right positions for that, apparently, these days, the way it works. I don't condone it. I'm just saying that's the way it generally works. And it's not brand new. It's been working like that for at least a decade or more. So it's just interesting times right there. But it is true, though. Like, I remember one of the main conversations in political science was how do candidates get elected? And they were saying most of the time, the common average voter will elect somebody based on their personality and their likability. And I was like, is that really the case? But as time's gone by, though, I've been like, oh, okay, like it actually really does work like that. It's proven itself over and over and over again. If you got the jokes, you got the personality, you can be elected. You can have the world's worst policies, you can have the world's worst personality, like when it comes to like morality and things like that, and you can still get elected, which is scary as hell because I'm like, why are people focused on the wrong thing? I'm not really sure if it's education that's a problem, like maybe a lack of education is leading to it, or what. I see Archangel say people didn't take too much seriously. I mean, I don't know why people wouldn't take it seriously. It's literally the highest office in the land. But people these days don't seem to understand the gravity. The president can make large changes, as people are starting to realize. The president's not just a placeholder. He actually has the power to make changes. And sometimes they can be good and sometimes they can be bad, depending on who you got.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But I would also have to say I don't know why people find the presidency or any elected position to kind of be like a joke. Like people will say crazy stuff in those positions. Like the last president, for example, one time when talking about, I think it was something about gun control. He brought up something like, good luck to someone with an AR-15 against a JDAM or so, something crazy like that. And then people are just like, oh, he's just owning the Republicans, or they're owning the libs. It's like, I don't really think that the elected leader of the whole country ought to be trying to own a whole other political party. It's like, that's not really his job. It's like his job is just to run the country. It's the job of someone to own so-and-so or whoever. If you're just some random political commentator, like that's kind of your job. That's how you end up getting views, but not the job of the president. The job of the president doesn't require you to be viral or for you to be popular or seen or for people to be talking about what you're saying or doing. It just requires you to be there every day. You're there for 4 years guaranteed. So the policies and your impact is a lot more important versus whether or not you're being talked about every day. But that's
I think. Oh, go ahead. I thought you were finished.
I was wrapping up right there. That's something that's lost on deaf ears sometimes these days for some folks. But go ahead.
Also, by the way, I saw Brian Merrill say the internet has destroyed us, Matt. Honestly, I think it has, like to a certain extent. I know I've said that before, but not just the internet specifically, but the ability to let people be way, way, way too connected with one another. Like, for example, social media, like the mere psychological effect of seeing other people's lives on a screen on a 24/7 basis like that. And also people being way too quick to espouse extremist ideology. They feel much more free to do that on the internet. If you go say something crazy in real life, typically you'd get weird looks at you, or like weird glances, like people are like, what the hell's wrong with that guy saying that extremist crap? But if you go say that on the internet, of course you've got a much wider audience, so you'll probably find a niche out there somewhere for every type of extremist statement you might want to make. You'll find a niche out there because there's always crazy people in corners of the world everywhere. So the internet connects those people together, and it creates like a form of psychosis with those people. They think that because they see other people on the internet that echo their crazy extremist statement, that somehow that gives it credibility, which before that wouldn't have ever happened. If they just said it in real life, they would have had a much harder time finding someone who related with that crazy statement. But now they have that fake sense of credibility behind it because of that. So honestly, social media has done a number on folks. I'm not sure how they reverse that psychological damage on people, but it's done a big number.
Also, one thing I'd have to say, and this is something that I've been seeing recently, and this is some constructive criticism more so than anything, but a lot of people really get involved in talking about what's going on in the country or what the country is doing, and people will be really opinionated on it, and they will die on a hill. They will get violent with people and threaten them over their beliefs. and they don't even really know enough to base their beliefs on what they're saying or the opposition to what they're saying. Because I have, like, over the past few days, speaking about just objectionable facts, like what the Second Amendment was meant for, which it's not an insurrection or a rebellion against the government, and then people say no, it is, and why there's no reason, or they come up with something that doesn't make any sense, like the Declaration of Independence says so, like that's even a governing article of the United States government or the laws of this land, or something like it's illegal for the president to go to war without a declaration of war by Congress, when over the past 80 years that's been the case. And people will say stuff like that, either knowing that that's not true and just wanting to say it because it aligns with what they politically believe, or they say it because they don't know otherwise. And that's not like to sit there and like criticize people who say that and like just put them down, but at the same time it's a little bit interesting to me how a lot of people don't really research a lot or dig through a lot, and a lot of people just fire off of what they think sounds the best. And that's something that I find a little interesting, because when I sat there and talked about originally, just to let you know how like I do things, when I first came up on the air about the Second Amendment, and that's not a free check, a blank check for anyone to overthrow the government, after that night off air, I spent 3 hours researching that and studying that deeply, and came up with the answer that that was the correct assessment, because one, Alexander Hamilton wrote that in Federalist Paper 29. Two, it says in Article 1, Section A of the U.S. Constitution, one of the duties of the Congress and the government is to put down insurrections and rebellions, which clearly tells us that the Second Amendment wouldn't contradict that, as that would make no sense. And then three, if you read what a militia is in the United States, the militia is the people, and they're supposed to be arming themselves so that way if they're called up by their state to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, or to defend the nation from an armed invasion, they are ready to serve. And that's what it says under the Militia Act of 1903, is that every male in the country aged 17 to 45 is a part of the unorganized militia, and so a paramilitary force for the larger part that is not actively serving or even in a reserve sense, but still is considered a part of the armed force of the country. So, you know, whenever Enforcer Matt or me say anything, and usually we're like, that's kind of on shaky ground, usually we either do snap research on air, or we research that heavily after we're off air to make sure that if we're wrong, we correct that, or if it was a right assessment, it has a lot more receipts and proof and backup to specifically speak about that.
But you know, in real life, though, people don't care about that. Like, if you're talking to someone who's like deeply entrenched in politics, and you want to whip out your phone and like show them like different evidence to prove them wrong or something, like, and not because you're trying to own them or something like that, like you're trying to like the old phrase goes, like own the libs or something like that. That whole junk to me is just stupid to the extreme. It's like, why are you wanting to own somebody? You're trying to, like, if you're really being and talking out of good faith, you'd want to try to change their mind to try to basically straighten them out for the better of themselves, not to actually just need to get one over on them. So, but in real life, though, if you pull out like some type of evidence on your phone and say, no, it shows right here, you're wrong, that person will immediately get hostile. Most people are not going to bother to listen. And they're also going to be like, man, I don't want to hear that junk, because they're already so dead set in their head about what they believe already. It's not going to change their mind. That's how deeply entrenched politics has made people these days.
Well, yeah, but that shouldn't be the case. Like that is the way it is, but it certainly shouldn't be the case. Because if you ever look into anything, folks, sometimes there's a clear answer to something, and then other times there's a gray area, and then at that point, folks ought to just come up with a compromise. But everyone wants to have it their way and their way only, even if it doesn't make any sense. And that's something that is just really weird to me about how the country works these days. Because if you ever look through most of U.S. history, there was always someone out there like Henry Clay. I'm sure some of y'all remember Henry Clay, who was known as the great negotiator in the Congress. Don't you remember Senator Henry Clay, Matthew? He was the guy who was pretty much making all of the compromises in Congress, or one of the head honchos of it, pretty much up till the Civil War almost.
Oh, I actually haven't studied that far back.
But there's actually been a decent amount, at least in recent history, of folks who either lead to compromises and actually get things done, or something along those lines where there isn't a clear answer, like Henry Clay and others. And I don't know why in the world that's not the case these days, because it's really leading to no results at all in any direction, and it's just leading to the country continuing to divide itself further, which is completely pointless. And also, I saw someone say, let's see, someone said, it was actually Jenna last name Tolles, you have a right to overthrow the government if it's tyrannical. That is something that a lot of people believe in the modern day, but it actually is not the case. And everyone always goes back to the Declaration of Independence being the reason why that's the case. And I'll put this out there really quickly. That letter, the Declaration of Independence, has no impact on the U.S. currently. The Declaration of Independence, as far as we are concerned, is a historical watershed writing, but it doesn't have anything to do with how our country runs today. The Declaration of Independence was a statement by the subjects of the British colonies in America that they were now conducting an open and armed revolt against the British with the pursued idea, as their casus belli, of the creation of a new state. Now, as far as that is concerned, the British did not give the colonies, nor does the U.S. government give the authority to private citizens to conduct a rebellion against the legal power. That's breaking the social contract, in a sense. So at that time, and this is what we know would have happened because the British said that they would do this, if they had caught any of the founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, John Adams, so on and so forth, they would have been tried as subjects of the British Empire, which they were, and they would have been executed for treason. They would have been hung, most likely, at the gallows for the crime that they had committed. And the same thing would generally happen here in the United States. We don't actually execute people for treason. We imprison them for incredibly long periods of time here. That's the law. But the U.S., much like the British, do not give a blank check to citizens to rebel or conduct an insurrection. It doesn't stop you from doing it technically, but if you do that, you are breaking the law, and you are doing that at your own risk. And another thing that I have to say is that the Declaration of Independence, the entire article lays out that the government of Britain is tyrannical as far as the colonies are concerned, is because the colonies do not get elected representation in the British Parliament. And for that reason, they're having laws and excises imposed on the colonies without any representation of the colonies themselves on those matters. And so for that reason, they considered the government to be tyrannical. Therefore, under the Declaration of Independence, they were going to fight to free themselves from the British so that way they could represent themselves in their own government that would represent their own interests and therefore be a non-tyrannical government, because it would be a government comprised of British subjects in the colonies, now Americans, that would represent their own self-interests. And so there really is no way for the U.S. government to be described as tyrannical, even by the parameters that were laid out in the Declaration of Independence. You may find some of their actions to be unlawful or going over the bounds of what would be believed to be constitutional, but even still, based off of what they were saying for the Declaration of Independence, they said the British government was tyrannical because there was no representation in that government for the colonists. In the U.S. government, there is representation for the people because we elect our representatives. Whether they're good or not is not the question. The question is, do we have elected representation? And the answer is yes. And so by that merit alone, which was the main argument in the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. government cannot be tyrannical by that definition because they stated tyranny as the concept of lack of representation, but laws being passed on them by a government that it doesn't even represent them. So that would be kind of my argument against that. And also another thing is that pretty much breaks down the entire democratic system if you have a right to rebel against a supposed tyrannical government. Because let's explore that in the modern lens. When, and I'll just be honest because this is true for both parties, so I'll lay it out a little bit more clearly. When Biden was president, the Republicans called him a tyrant. So does that give the Republicans a blank check at that point to overthrow the government? And then with a Republican in charge right now, the Democrats are saying that he's a tyrant. So does that give the Democrats the blank check to start an armed rebellion and overthrow the government? And the answer in both of those instances would be no, because at that point, it's entirely conjecture as to whether or not the government's tyrannical. It's just up to someone's opinion, and opinion is not really a reason to start an armed rebellion and completely degrade or completely collapse the entire U.S. democratic system. And on top of that, better still, the real question is if the government is tyrannical, what is the lesser of two evils in that sort of a situation? A tyranny that is the tyranny of the many and is elected by the people across the whole country, or the tyranny of an armed few that overthrow that government and then run the nation with an iron fist? Which one is more tyrannical than the other? And I would say that the people who took up arms to overthrow the government would clearly be far more tyrannical than the current government, even if it was tyrannical, because they are going against the will of the entire republic and pretty much overturning their result through the force of arms. So I would generally say that's why I don't really agree with the idea, and also it just really isn't there, for that matter, in the Constitution or anywhere else, with the idea that you have a right to overthrow the government for any reason, because the government, by definition, is a democratic institution. If you don't like it, the way you conduct a revolution is to just vote out the representative you don't like in your district or your constituency, or to vote the president out if you don't like him. That's how you conduct a revolution in this country, is through the ballot box, not through the force of arms. So I hope that addresses that the best I can, in my opinion, in the most pragmatic or sensible sort of way that I can, with the explanation or the idea that I would have on that, because I think the idea of an armed revolt or rebellion in this country is entirely undemocratic, goes against our founding principles, it goes against the wishes of the founding fathers for that matter, and it also completely violates the social contract that we have in this nation, to where the government is an elected representation of the people and therefore is supposed to be working towards its interest, and then it's the responsibility of the people to regulate that government by their votes at the ballots. And that generally is the way it's supposed to operate. If it doesn't look like it's operating like that to you right now, and you don't like what the government's doing, whether it was the last presidency under Biden or Trump, that's also why we have the First Amendment with the freedom of expression, is so that way people can conduct that peaceful revolution and go out into the streets and hopefully win some people over to their side and maybe change the result of the next election one way or the other to support the party or the concepts or beliefs that they have that would make this country less tyrannical or not moving on a path towards tyranny. But that would be the way that it actually works, at least to me. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. So moving on to our next super chat here. This one goes to Rob S. And thank you very much, Rob, for that $20 support right there. And we do appreciate that very, very much. And Rob said, love the news and LSA. And also, we're glad you love the news, Rob. We're glad to have you.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Rob. And thank you so much for loving the news. And thank you for supporting us so that way we can keep it running. And so I got to say a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Terry Strife, and thank you very much, Terry, for that 20. They said, I get all the comedy and all the great news right here, and I love our commentators, our speakers, and the live chat, and thank you for that. He said, peace, love, and happiness from my house to you all.
Hey, and thank you so much for the kind words, Terry Stripe. And thank you for enjoying the comedy and the news. We try our best to try and deliver a balance of both. And I got to thank you massively so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here right now, keeping this thing running 1,317 days after it started its continuous coverage. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Slow Roast Jenna, last name Tolls, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Slow Roast, for that $20 support. They said North Broadway Avenue and Dean A. McGee Avenue in OKC, I think it's Oklahoma City, on Street View. And talk about government not thinking. Look at our art, and it's a ring.
And let's see here. Where in the world is that again?
It's North Broadway Avenue and Dean A. McGee Avenue.
North Broadway Avenue. Let's see here. North, and I'm assuming this is in downtown somewhere. North Broadway Avenue. North Broadway. I'm not seeing in North Broadway. Maybe this is, nope, it's not it. So let's see. Let's type in North Broadway, just to start. North Broadway Avenue. So here is North Broadway. And then what was the other street we were looking for?
It was Dean A. McGee Avenue.
Dean A. McGee Avenue. D. A. McGee Avenue. Where in the world is that? Let's see. Dean A. McGee. I can't find that one. Oh, here we are. So it's somewhere around here. You know what? I'm going to check that really quickly off air before we show that. So let me check. Oh my God. You know what? I'm actually going to show that because it should be fine on YouTube. But this is the COKC ring, which was built in Oklahoma City. And it says COKC all over the side of it. And I think you can kind of tell, Matthew, what they're getting at.
Let's see. It's like a big barrel or something. What's that say?
It's like a big.
Did that say cook or does that say?
Is
What
this
does that
what?
say?
this is supposed to say COKC, but when I was looking at it, the reason why I took it off air is that it looks like something else. So yeah, Oklahoma City's got its own ring of a sort. So
Isn't
yeah.
that what like James May says whenever he's like screws something up? He's like, "Oh, cock."
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, dude, I was like, no freaking way. Like, I saw that. That's why I had to take it off air, folks. I was like, I don't know if that actually says what I thought it said, and it almost does. It's like if the K and the C were flipped around, it would be a giant cock ring, and that would be terrible. Like that would it really kind of is already. I got to be honest with y'all. That's news to. Oh my goodness. Someone made like a snap of it. They said the COKC ring.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. This is I'm not sure what the idea was. Like, it just is like a general thing. I'm not even really sure what this is supposed to be.
Me either. It beats me. I don't know what that was supposed to be. It's a mystery, really. It's a big mystery. So yeah, I thank you so much for the support, Jenna last name Tolls, and sharing that with us. I should have expected something like that from someone with your name in the chat. But a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running and sharing with us something quite unique from the Oklahoma City area. Very interesting. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, also, what does the Oklahoma State Capitol building look like? Oh, it's a largely traditional. Oh, wow, that rotunda is really nice.
Oh wow, they did this one nice. It looks like the U.S. Capitol a little bit.
Yeah, it does. I like that's the entrance to the Senate chamber. Oh, dude, I like that, man. Like a reference to modern industry. That's actually really cool.
Yeah, it's very communist.
Well, it ain't communist. Like, it's just modern industry.
I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
That's all. It's just modern industry. And the paintings here, I mean, these are actually quite nice. These appear to be of the Second World War. And then over here on this wall, we have one of the indigenous tribal chiefs, I believe, of this area. Another warship, probably another USS Oklahoma. And then it appears to be probably a significant general from the state. But this is a really cool little spot. I like this Capitol building. You know one Capitol building that I do not like, folks? I'll show y'all this one. It's down in Baton Rouge. It's one of my most unfavorite Capitol buildings. Where is it? The Louisiana Capitol building. It's somewhere down. You can tell it's kind of in like a larger park sort of an area. And I cannot find it off the top of my head here. So let me just pull it up. The Capitol building. This one. I don't like it. Let me see if I can get y'all a good front shot of it. Oh, dang, that's not a good one. Here we go. That is the Louisiana State Capitol building.
Really? I don't like that, honestly. I'll be honest with you, I don't like Louisiana. Like, I kind of put Louisiana in the same group as Mississippi a little bit when it comes to, like, the infrastructure and stuff like that. I just don't like it.
I'll be honest with you, I don't like this building at all. If y'all don't know, this was actually built during the FDR era and is an Art Deco style Capitol building, one of the few. I think it's actually quite hideous. And also the fact that they don't really pressure wash the thing at all has really made it look worse. I just don't like it too much. And it also kind of looks like a large glizzy, if you see that as well, man. Like the whole thing's just wrong. I don't like it. The inside, though, is pretty cool. Like, I'll give it that. Like, it's an Art Deco styled interior, which is really interesting for a Capitol, but I don't like it. It looks like something you'd see in, like, a Batman movie out of Gotham, and for that reason, it's not really a good one. There are cool ones, really cool ones, though, throughout America. Like, one of the more interesting ones is actually Atlanta's Capitol building. I wouldn't say it's one of the best looking, but it sure as hell is interesting because their dome is literally covered in solid gold plate. And let me see if I can show you all that. Let's see here. Oh, here we are. There. The golden plated dome. It's really weird. It's the only one like that in the country, actually.
Kind of reminds me of like a mosque.
Kind of, yeah, or a basilica, really. Like, and also the dome has a weird symmetry to it. It's almost more like a deodorant cap than anything. Like, it kind of looks like that. And also the interior isn't really that great either. It's nothing that impressive. Honestly, it looks like a plantation, honestly, on the inside. It's like very It's like very kind of gaudy but basic at the same time, a little weird. But there are other cool ones. I'm trying to rake my brain to think of some of the top tier capitals in America, and I would say that if we went to California at Sacramento, which is the capital of the state, I could show you all the state capitol building here. This is California's Capitol building.
Honestly, I think Utah is up there at the top when it comes to Capitol buildings. The Utah's Capitol is very, very nice.
Honestly, man, yeah, theirs is really top tier. Like, theirs is pretty cool. But the California State building is really nice looking, too. It's like a mini U.S. Capitol building. And I also like the statues of the people that they have, you know, like the horse riders, so on. Like, well-detailed stuff. I like that. That's pretty cool. And also the inside's pretty nice, too. But let's go to Salt Lake City and go to the Capitol inside of Salt Lake, because this one is pretty cool. A little bit new, actually, like at least most of it is. But this is the Utah Capitol building. Really impressive, actually.
It's really impressive in person, especially at night. It looks really good. There it is right there. I actually walked around that whole thing at night. Like, I just got out and walked around it. Didn't feel sketchy at all to me, even though some people were like, "Oh, I don't know, that's pretty sketchy." I was like, I don't see it sketchy. I walked around the whole thing.
I gotta be honest with y'all, I wish that all governmental buildings at least had some sort of semblance of these more grandeur styles like this that most state capitol buildings have, even for basic functions, like really deck out the post offices and stuff. I wish they did that, because that would be so nice, like to go into every single government building and have it really nice and high end. Like this Capitol is a straight up dub, one of the best in the country. And I mean, look at the interiors. I mean, the interiors are sweeping, they're large, they give an idea of grandeur but grace. Like, it's a great balance architecturally. And I'd have to say this is one of the best in the country. This is also the view that it has. Well, that's the Capitol down there, but this is kind of the view that it has.
That's a hell of a view right there. Look at that. That's a view right there that I could live in.
I mean, really. I mean, like, this is...
Now look at this.
It's covered in gold!
They said,
Like,
put the gold on the ceiling. They said, sir, can we hang a little bit of gold leaf on the ceiling? We want it to be 24 carats. We want carats, not the orange ones. We want the gold ones. You got to put them in there, right? Look at those flags. They're set up just right. They got them stapled to the wall. You got to love it. You got to love those flags, the way they're furling out like that. You got to love them.
Man, someone came in here and said, "Oh, the flags, they're not perfect." And then they closed the door and you just heard like a giant stapler stapling it to the wall. But man, I mean, honestly though, that is a beautiful view out there. You know something, folks? I have been doing a lot of research recently up here on the Transcontinental Railroad, which is north of Salt Lake. This is actually where it was joined, was right here. I actually found out, folks, through a good deal of research, they actually recreated perfectly. This is really interesting, Matthew. The main line that came through this area, this is right here. This spot is where the Central Pacific and the Union Pacific met, and they even built the Union Pacific siding that was made off to the side of that, because before they joined the two right there at Promontory, the Union Pacific was actually still building its main line to meet the Central Pacific, and it made it to right there. That's where it stopped. And then by that point, the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific just agreed, let's just build a switch right there and just have the two of them meet here at Promontory, and then that's what they did.
That's what I like about them. They're really big into Promontory. They said, let's build it in Promontory. They said, that's what they said.
And also, there's some really cool, like, landmarks around this place, too. Like, around here, trying to see if I can find it, because this is the original route right here that the Central Pacific took, and the Union Pacific was right below that. You can actually still see the fills and cuts that they made to make these routes. But right here, this little formation of rocks was called by the workers the Chinese Arch. If y'all don't know, there's actually a huge amount of Chinese immigrants who worked on building the Transcontinental Railroad. Most of the labor pool, or the workforce that made up the construction teams of the railroad, were actually from China. And a lot of them, unfortunately, got deported right after this was completed. So, you know, like, things repeat quite commonly. But beyond that, a lot of Chinese workers, for some reason, found these rocks to be of significance, and so this became known as the Chinese Arch, this series of rocks on this turn right here, which is really interesting stuff. And then there was another place down here. I'm trying to see. Let's see if we follow this just right. Ah, here we are. Damn, man, they got rid of it. Right here, around this spot, was the town of Blue Creek, right here. And this was known, y'all probably have heard of it before, especially the folks in America, or at least some reference to it. It was called, a nickname, Dead Man's Gulch. And I'm sure that so many of y'all have heard of that. It almost sounds like myth, but it was a real place, and it was a tent city, little ghost town on the railroad. And workers, Chinese and American, that ever got into a spat with each other, they just ride the train to the spot and they just blast each other. They kill each other. So this place became known as a place of extreme violence. This tiny little tent city, it was called Hell's Half Acre because the tent city was only a half acre large, and so many people ended up shooting and killing each other as a part of the work crews here over unsettled disputes and differences, that it became known across the nation. It was like a tiny Dodge city in a sense. So if you ever hear Dead Man's Gulch, it actually came from this little spot right here, which is apparently in the grounds of the Northrop Grumman Testing and Operations Facility out here north of Salt Lake now. Which is wild to think that that's now where Dead Man's Gulch was. Hey, I guess they're keeping the name alive, you know? Dead Man's Gulch, killed a lot of guys. They're making weapons, to dispatch the enemies of the Republic. So kind of keeping on brand.
Yeah, I would say maybe so, maybe so.
But perhaps, maybe. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, at least the best that we can, at least the best, I suppose, that we can. And also, Matthew, you know, one place that I'd like to see is this place up here, Kelton. This is also the old railroad grade as well, a part of it. But it went right across the northern part of the Salt Lake Flats up here in the Salt. And that's something I want to see, is what that place looked like. But anyways, with that, folks, it is time for us to move on into the next one.
Also, by the way, let me get rid of this guy putting like 1,000 commas in the live chat. I don't even understand what the strategy was behind that. He literally just put like 20 commas like in one chat a piece. I don't understand like that. I don't understand it. But anyways, moving into our next one here. This one goes to MD and KRP Global Entertainment. And thank you very much for that $20 support, by the way. They put in a super sticker that said, "Yous are amazing."
Hey, thank you so much for the kind words of support. You are amazing for helping this channel to keep running. So a massive, humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here, our next one here, be patient, folks. I gotta scroll back up. This one goes to Nathan Snyder, who puts in the 15. And thank you very much, Nathan, as well, for that $15 support. He said, "Have you seen turbine-powered drones? I just found the Axion by Fusion Flight, and you can ride and fly at 225 miles per hour. Get in, dude. Trust me." Is that something you can ride, like a person can get in it and ride the drone? Like, that's interesting. Like, let me see this thing.
That's it.
Is that a price on it?
Yeah.
How much is that?
About $300,000.
300,000, eh?
Just about, yeah.
300,000.
That's a little steep.
That's a little steep. Also, by the way, where do you fly it to? And also, is it like a concept or is it a real deal?
Let's find out. Let's go to their website. They're getting free branding and marketing right now. Powered by 8 microjet engines. This diesel fueled. What the hell are we, on the railroad? Like, we're running a diesel electric out here, everyone. Flying car offers versatile takeoff capabilities and rapid reconfiguration for racing, medevac, or heavy lift missions. The action is based on the flight-proven, smaller scale jet quad.
I kind of want to see the video so bad, but I don't want to get in copyright trouble.
I was wanting to watch it too. The most notable advantage of Axion over similarly sized is the top speed of 200 miles per hour and acceleration of 0.5 G. Let's
0.5 G. That means that they must accelerate slow then to be going 200 miles an hour and it has a 0.5 G acceleration.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. The jet engines of the Axion consume a variety of heavy fuels ranging from gas station diesel to biodiesel to Jet A, making it easy to refuel the vehicle almost anywhere in the world. Furthermore, it only takes a few minutes to refuel the 30-gallon fuel tank as opposed to several hours it takes to recharge an electrical aerial transport. Well, how much range does this thing have? Like, do they say that? How much flight time do you get out of it? I got a lot of questions about this thing, and there's not really a lot of answers to the actual abilities of the thing. You know, it's just like this thing is.
Here's a question I got though. It's not a practical question, but do you have to look like that when you're sitting in it?
Yes, that is mandatory.
Is that a requirement? Honestly, this guy looks like he just sat down on the fair ride or something like that. Like he just sat down on the Ferris wheel. Like, you're not really entirely sure if you want to ride the Ferris wheel, but you sat down and committed to it anyway, so you're fully in, and you just got to roll with it.
Let's see, Axion drone in flight. Let's see if we can find that, like a picture of it at least. There is no pictures, at least on Google, of this thing actually flying, at least the big one. The little one actually has flown, but the big one, I cannot see any pictures of this thing actually flying anywhere on Google, at least. So I guess it's like a prototype still, maybe?
I'm not really sure personally. I'll have to check it out after stream though, because I'm kind of curious at this point. You can go pretty damn fast. Like that's a pretty fast little drone there.
Yeah, honestly, it's interesting. I'll have to take a look at that as well off of the air, but still, a huge thanks to you for the support. I hope that has addressed that the best way that we can, at least at the moment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next super chat here is going to be a $20 support from none other than Chef Danny B. And thank you very much, Danny, for that 20 right there. And it's good to see you once again. And Danny said, good evening, Enforcers. Chef Danny here. And sorry I haven't been in the chat lately. I've been super busy. The catering business and my restaurant job is keeping me very busy. And I've been listening, though. And LOTLSA, and I appreciate y'all.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Danny B. And a big good evening to you. And a massive thanks to you so much for the support. And it's perfectly fine you haven't been in the chat. Better late than never is what I always say. And we always love to know that you're still watching. And I got to say that catering business must be doing quite well these days. And I hope it is, at least. And I also got to say thank you so much for listening still. And, of course, long live the Lee Spring Army. And the Lee Spring Army will never die. So a massive thanks to you once again. And also, folks, it just hit me, everyone. It just hit me of a radical idea. I see some people still talking about the government shutdown in the live chat, and I just got hit with a radical idea, folks. One that would really shake up the whole deal with the shutdowns. So, how about this, folks? No one's going to agree to this. I can already tell you this, Matthew. Nobody would love this idea. But if a government shutdown happens, the next elections that come around, midterms, what have you, whatever the next election is, if a government shutdown happens, and people do not like the fact that happens, which a lot of people don't, when the next election comes around, whoever you would vote for normally, you just vote for whoever that person isn't. So everyone, no matter who they were, that was involved in the shutdown, at least in that election, midterm, presidential election, whatever, they all get voted out. So that pretty much starts to hold the rest of them accountable, because if they don't want to lose their seats as well, because everyone's just going to vote for whoever isn't there right now, they have to ensure that the government does not shut down. Otherwise, the public will just start voting them out in blocks every single time their election comes around. Then at that point, you can guarantee that there will never be a government shutdown, because they will know that a lot of them, no matter how much lobbying is going on, will lose their seats. That might be a way, if you don't like the shutdown, to skirt around that sort of an issue. That probably would start to really make it quite clear people don't like those too much. I don't know if people would do that, though, because, people would be like, yes, until they have to vote for the party they're not a part of. And then they're going to be like, no, and then no one would do it. But that's an idea. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, just to give everybody a little shout out real quick. And when I say a shout out, not really a shout out, but let's see here. We do have a little bit of breaking news coming out. It looks like in El Segundo, California, there's currently explosions being heard, at least according to reports we're hearing, and large fires breaking out at an oil refinery in El Segundo, California. And it looks like it's a very serious one. Also, unfortunately, we sadly can't show any of these videos because it's from the U.S. and they're going to copyright the hell out of us, even though it would be fair use. They're still going to do it anyway. But it's a very, very large fire right now at that refinery. It looks like there might be actually multiple points of that refinery currently on fire. So a little bit odd. We're currently seeing a pretty large refinery fire, which is very rare in the United States of America, extremely rare, in fact, especially one of this size. So I wish we could show the video of it, but sadly we just can't. But trust me, it's a large one. And if you want to see the video, it's on our Twitter page right now.
So click on the link in the description below to go to our Twitter if you would like to see it. But also, Matthew, that's kind of shocking. This is actually a sizable refinery literally on the beach at LA. I didn't know that this was here, actually. It's literally south of LAX.
Yeah, I'm actually seeing in the actual CBS News live stream of this whole thing right here. I see a plane literally flying right past it that just took off from LAX. So it's right there next to the airport, and it looks like I can't tell. There's definitely. It looks like there's 2 points of fire off this thing. I'm seeing one on the left portion toward the coast. There's a huge fire on like one of the structures, and then on the right side, closer inland, there's another fire on a different part of the facility. So that's pretty severe looking.
That sounds very severe. I wish I could show it on air. I actually can't see it either, folks, at the moment. I'll have to wait until I get off air to see it. But that does sound quite large, actually. Also, by the way, I thought I'd share this little fun fact with y'all. Do you see these streets right here, Matthew, just to the west of LAX that have nothing around them, but there's loads of streets?
Yeah.
Did you know that at one point this was a neighborhood?
No, actually, I did not know that. I would like to have it there now. That's for sure.
Yeah, it was a neighborhood, and because of all the noise complaints, instead of the city of LA moving LAX, which clearly would have made the most sense out of these two options, they just went and bought out all of the properties here in this area and then just bulldozed everything.
Interesting. That's I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, can't y'all? Isn't that ridiculous, folks? The airport buying out people's properties instead of just moving the whole damn airport. I mean, that's just insane, folks. The ludicrousness of California. I mean, that is a stupid idea. They should have taken LAX and I don't know, moved it out of the city. It's just someplace like San Diego because that's kind of where LA ends. Is like right on the edge of San Diego. That would have made so much more sense than just buying out all these people's properties and then bulldozing their houses. I mean, they had memories there, people. Come on, Jack. But I'm just kidding, by the way. But still, that's why this little
Also,
Hmm?
Also, I mean, interrupt, but also real quick, I'm seeing another piece of news about this refinery fire here. It looks like I'm seeing people say that they saw an explosion from the place, and also it looks like the local news there in Los Angeles is also reporting explosions being heard. Someone here who claims to be an eyewitness is claiming that they saw this explosion apparently all the way from Santa Monica. So apparently pretty large here. Let's see. I'm trying to get some more information on this because it looks like it's just happening right now. This appears to have been a very large explosion. So, like I said, multiple fires on this location. So, I'm not sure what caused multiple explosions like that. I'm not an oil refinery expert when it comes to how those systems work. But if someone is in the chat, though, let us know how likely that even is for multiple fires to break out like that, because I'm not sure how that would even happen, honestly.
That is interesting. I don't want to cry sabotage right now, folks. That would probably be a little bit too preemptive, but that is quite interesting. Very interesting, as a matter of fact. But with that, also, Matty, how many super chats do we have left?
So, we currently have about 30 left.
Oh well, that's not too many. That's manageable. Actually, like we don't have like 60 or 70 of them. But with that, folks, we're gonna get back into the super chats in the meantime as we hear about that news unfolding. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Greenscan, who puts in a 10. And they said, have a coffee and take a live chat question.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. We will have a coffee, and we will make sure to get a live chat in your honor. So what do we got, Matthew?
And this one goes to Jack Ray, who said, have you heard of the U.S. Army land-based Typhoon missile system for launching Tomahawks and other missiles?
I have heard about it. I've heard that it's in prototype phases with only a few available, but I have heard about it. And so I hope that has addressed that well. A big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, for the people saying it, so far I've seen zero reports of any type of drone activity over Los Angeles. I see people speculating that maybe it was a drone that hit it. I see no evidence of that whatsoever. So if something was happening, we don't have any evidence of it. Oh my God. Well, hold on a second. Unfortunately, I think we might be able to show this image here. We can't show the videos, obviously, but we can show this image that we're seeing right here. So I think you should be good to show the image.
Let's show the image. Oh.
So this right here, we're being told, is an aerial shot of this whole thing. And also, by the way, we're using this under fair use just to commentate on it. We're not, trying to do anything with a photo, but just talking about it. Looking here, you can see there's 2 points of fire on this facility, and obviously it's a very large smoke plume coming up from it. So it looks like, I don't know even what would cause that. I'll be honest with you, I'm not even going to speculate on it. I'm not sure what would even cause that.
So it looks like one explosion, actually. This appears to be a burn-off that's happening at a I forgot what these are called, but it's some sort of a burn-off exhaust valve or something along those lines that's supposed to burn off any excess vapors. So that doesn't appear to be anything out of the ordinary, but this is clearly out of the ordinary, and that appears to be an explosion somewhere within a condenser or somewhere else within critical machinery at the plant. So it looks to be one explosion from what we can tell right here, and then the burn-off makes it look like there's two. But that still is quite a large explosion. Hopefully we'll be able to hear something about that. Sometimes industrial accidents do happen, folks. This may not be any form of sabotage or an attack of any type at all, but we'll probably hear some sort of a statement from the company here soon about why that happened or what's going on at the facility, or at least from the city of LA itself. So a very interesting sort of occurrence nonetheless.
Yeah, I would say so, certainly. I'll be curious to see what this turns out to be, because that's certainly a huge fire right there. But nonetheless, though, we're moving on to our next super chat, which goes to Brian Merrill, who puts in a 10. And he said, do like we did in Panama, but really build their government the best as we can, as well as their resources and sharing the wealth in the future. And China, check. Oil futures, big check.
And I thank you for the support. And I would have to say that if we did go in, we might as well do it right. There's no reason to half do it or half bake it. Go in and build it up like we would have Germany, South Korea, or Japan, because not only can we turn it into a high-functioning economy, but also a stable ally at that point. So that's what I would say. That would be my 2 cents. If we did go ahead with that, is to do it right the first time and don't half bake it, so that way it ends up becoming a terrible failure in the future. But a huge thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to MJO Fair 74, who puts in a 10, and thank you very much as well for that support. They said, fair day, and you both look up Cheyenne, Cheyenne, Wyoming static train displays and the depot at your convenience. And what do you think about the Thailand and Cambodia situation and that one from the chat? Thanks, VR and LSA.
And I thank you for the support. Answering your question about the the Thailand-Cambodia situation, that one is one that is just extremely petty. Of course, both of them think it's a legitimate reason to fight. I think it's incredibly petty between the two parties. But generally, we are going to align with the Thai because they are more Western aligned than Cambodia. But outside of that, the Cheyenne train depot is a really cool place. Historic, as a matter of fact. And I think there is a static display near here. I think I've looked at it before. Where in the world is it? Where in the world is it? This is the Union Pacific steam shop where they maintain 4014 and 844 and all of the other steam engines that they're working on right now to get them ready for excursions. Wow, look at that. An old Chicago Northwestern F unit. That's an F7, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. That is really cool. I gotta be honest with y'all. This place is a treasure trove of neat stuff. Cheyenne's really cool. At least for the railroading side of things, because it's the beginning of the Sherman Hill. But outside of that, where in the world is the static train? Oh, look! Here's one of them. The big boy 4004, which got interred here permanently at this park in Cheyenne. That's one of the big boy series. But still, a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that has addressed that well. And I hope that that was a part of the open air train exhibit that you were talking about. Hopefully I found it. Also, what does the Wyoming state capitol look like? Oh, it's a modest one. But it is nice.
It's okay.
It's all right. I mean, it's okay. But anyways, with that, a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep rolling. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to 2 hot dog guys, 1 cup of snow, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support. He said, I haven't heard, but has anyone woken up Green Day? And also Slava Ukraine, LLT, LSA, and thank you both for the news.
I haven't woken up green ever. Usually I'm pale. But beyond that, a big thanks to you for support, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from Crispy, who said, well said, Enforcer Andrew.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. And I don't know what that's in reference to, but I thank you for appreciating it. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Silence. And Silence said, brand diversification idea. Have thoroughly vetted viewers call in to share their geopolitical and foreign policy hot takes and political statement equal perma and accidental equal 3 strikes out system, and maybe have a new segment.
Oh, I've seen what happened on C-SPAN. I've seen what happens on C-SPAN. I thank you for the support. I would generally skip on that, though. because I know a lot of people would use that with good faith, but the ones that would use that badly would get us banned pretty quick. Like say like this is one I can guarantee you will happen because it's also happened on C-SPAN and they get fined by the FCC every time it happens. But on YouTube we would get banned. Someone is going to come on that even if we tried to vet them heavily, they're just going to pretend to be a upstanding citizen to get through the process, to get on air, and live on air start flinging out racial slurs until the cows came home or until we got them off air. And once someone does that, we are banned. Like, so that's why we, like, it's a cool idea, but that would have to be like a pre-recorded segment if we ever did it. Or it could never be done because there would just be too many people trying to troll for the hell of trolling. Like, at that point, we were literally opening ourselves up as a target, even to people who don't even care about the show either way, just people who get a kick out of being destructive, to a sense. They're going to go, oh my God, this is low-hanging fruit. Let me just pretend to be a good person, get on air, and then go to town, go ham, and then we would be gone. So I do think for support, it's a cool idea in theory, but in practice, that would be very dangerous. That's literally Russian roulette in a sense. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from Ed. And Ed said, LSA, an Irish Ed here. And can you pull up a picture of the Pennsylvania Capitol building, the main rotunda, and the House and Senate?
Pennsylvania Capitol building? The Pennsylvania Capitol building in Philadelphia? Is this where the Capitol is? I think it is. Am I mistaken? Am I wrong? My fellow Americans. Let me just pull up the Pennsylvania Capitol. Oh, this is in Harrisburg. Why in the hell would I never have thought of Harrisburg? For some reason I was thinking it was Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. I got that totally wrong. But that's a pretty okay one. The green though, the green's a little odd, but it doesn't look too bad. The entrance to it is baller though. I mean, that actually looks sick. And look at the interior.
The interior is fit for a king.
Make it the seed.
Huh.
Okay, well, they're making it the seed. Man, let's see. Wow. This is honestly pretty impressive stuff right here. Really impressive stuff. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, have y'all seen this place? Have y'all looked inside of this thing? I mean, this is nuts here. This is high end. Dang. This is really cool. I gotta say, I'm a big fan of this one. I think this was pretty cool. Matthew, what would you rate it? Call it.
I would rate this. I would rate it a 2. Not really. I'd rate it probably like an 8.
I would say this thing is high end, honestly. Oh, look at that. I don't know what that's. The moon and the day. And is this people like dying and living? Like it looks kind of like it, but
Like some of that devilish stuff. We're not getting into that. Not
looks
today,
like some
not
of that
today.
devilish shit and real crazy stuff like that. Bohemian Grove. People always go, I love Bohemian. And I gotta be honest with you, I don't like the Bohemian Grove, but I like myself some Bohemian Rhapsody. Always listen to it. I play this song. You can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need. And at least in our instance, you get neither. You get neither. You don't get what you want or what you need. The government shut down. Kiss my ass. Go home and cry about it or something, maybe. Like, I don't know, maybe you need to mail a package? Whop whop. Everyone needs to mail packages. Get the hell out of here and go home. And some people say, sir, I've got to mail this package. It's so important to me. And I go, oh, what, your mother's ashes are in that box? So screw you, asshole. She should have died at a different time. You're not mailing that back home. Not on my watch. But beyond that, I do have to say that this all painting thing on the wall, really crazy stuff. And this room does not have enough gold in it. It has too much wood, not enough gold. Wood is for the poor. Gold is for the real ones. The alpha chads is what they call them. Or the Gen Z people sit there and say something like, they pop it on my quiz until I whiz, or something like some crazy shit. I don't know. But beyond that, I hope that does address that the best I can. He's a man and teller. But anyways, we're on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to MD and KRP Global Entertainment yet again, and they put in a 20 this time, and thank you very much, good sir, once again for the second support of the night, and we do appreciate that very, very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you massively for the support. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing a reality. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Kush, who puts in a 10. And thank you, Kush, as well for that support. They said, why does the IDF need so long to allegedly annihilate Gaza when it's just half the size of Berlin and LLT LSA?
It's because there's millions of people living in there. And also on top of that, because there's millions of people living in there, it takes a while for them to root out and find the Gazan, the Hamas fighters and take them out. That's why it takes so long, at least in a sense. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $6 super chat from Lucas Chimera. And he said, LSA forever.
And long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Sundown, who said LSA, and we appreciate the non-biased news, and you two are a USA national treasure. And thank you very much. That's very high praise.
Really high
there.
praise.
We appreciate that very, very much.
And I gotta say, what high praise! That's really high. Wow! And I gotta say, thank you so much for the kind words and the support, because you're helping us to continue to stay on air to try and stay American national treasure. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And we also have a $5 super chat from Kaylee McCullough once again. And thank you very much, Kaylee, for the second or third support of the night. They said, go into the jungle and hide sounds familiar.
It kind of is familiar. Honestly, I'd say that down here in Alabama, I mean, this is a jungle. I mean, this place is humid as hell. Have y'all ever been down here, like in the middle of the summer? It's like 103 degrees outside with 100% humidity. I mean, that's literally worse weather-wise than most of the year in Vietnam, like for the humidity and the temperature. And that's what everyone always talked about in Vietnam. They'd be like, man, it was so hot in Nam, you could cut through the air with a knife. It's like, shit, have you ever been to Alabama in the summer? I mean, like, it's like a couple of degrees hotter over here, actually, which is bizarre because you wouldn't think that. But, funnily enough, folks, when people would be sent over to Vietnam, they'd always send them for tropical warfare training, I believe in Georgia at Fort Benning back in the day, because it was close enough to the kind of conditions they'd be in over there. But it is hot as hell down here. Like, don't let anyone kid you. It's even hotter in Florida. Like, we went down there one time looking for the HQ 3.0 to West Palm Beach. Man, Matthew can remember it. We were walking from the Brightline station to the hotel, and it felt like Popeye on that one cartoon where that music was playing, and they were all like slumped over walking through the desert. And it was like that after just a couple of blocks. It was so damn hot out there and so humid. It felt like the air was actually kicking you down to the ground and beating you. It was really beating them. They were walking around going, sir, turn down the temperature. And they said, no, we're going to keep it up. The temperature just got 10 degrees higher. Beat their asses. Beat them down. But anyways, with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Animal Farm, who puts in a 5. And they said, if we invade Venezuela without Congress declaring war, impeachment should be next. Well, technically, Animal Farm, if Venezuela is invaded, technically it's legal for him to do that. Even though it would technically be, well, let me phrase it a little bit better than that. It would be preferable if the president would go to Congress first and ask the question about that. But he legally has the right to go down there and invade. He has the right to start the war without officially declaring war, because he can't do that. Only Congress can do that. But the catch is, though, once a president gets us knee-deep in a war, it becomes basically necessary at that point to continue it. So does Congress really have a say at that point? I would personally argue no, because we found out in the Middle East, once a president takes us to war and we get knee-deep into it, it's not like you just suddenly pull those troops out. You're already knee-deep in a war at that point. So it kind of makes Congress's decision for them, which is kind of going against the whole purpose of the War Powers Resolution. So I don't know. It's a close one. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say, really, if the Congress approves what he's doing, there really is no reason to impeach him, because if he is to be impeached, then hell, you could really impeach anyone. Like literally, you could impeach Biden, Obama, Bush, Clinton, Gerald R. Ford, Carter, Reagan, so on and so forth. I mean, all of them were involved in wars. None of them had congressional approval. Literally all the way back to Eisenhower himself and Kennedy. I mean, none of them had congressional approval to start any war. So if we were to impeach the current president for that, then technically, in retrospect, everyone should have been impeached all the way from Eisenhower on up. And at that point, that wouldn't really make a lot of sense, because if you lay out a precedent like that, and then you never contest that for 80 years, there really is no argument now to say, oh, well, this guy's doing it, and now we're going to make it a golden rule sin to violate. And it's like, well, if that's the case, I mean, we could go on and on about all kinds of stuff that should have been impeached. Like, let's talk about a couple of them just to make it fair, because this is how the world works. For example, Osama bin Laden was killed in Pakistan under the Obama administration. Should we have impeached him because he technically started a war on Pakistani soil to take out him? I mean, you could have argued that. I don't think that's fair at all. I think that was 100% well authorized sort of an operation to take. Or, for example, with Biden, we could have impeached him for bombing the Houthis the first go around. He didn't get any congressional declaration of war against the Houthis. He just started bombing them. And would that be appropriate? I would say no. I would say that the action was well defensible. They were conducting attacks against commercial shipping, and the president had 100% the authority to defend our commercial shipping interests globally. And we could go through every administration and do that all the way back to Eisenhower on every single one of them. And should they be impeached or not? Because all of them have conducted actions similar to this. And I'd say that the answer would be no. If we wanted to change this, the Congress could band together, or y'all could elect representatives into the Congress to band together to pass an amendment further clarifying the section 1, well, actually the Article 1 and section that states that the Congress has the ability to declare war, and state that the president does not have any authority to conduct offensive warlike actions without the Congress specifically conducting a vote on that. That you could do that if you wanted to, but at the moment, considering that this has been standing for 80 years, I don't think that this would be grounds for impeachment, because everyone could have been impeached before him for the very same sort of offense. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Crispy. And thank you very much, Crispy, for that $10 support right there and helping to keep the channel running once again. And we do sincerely appreciate that support very, very much. And we also have a 5 from Troy Robinson. And thank you very much, Troy, as well. He said that Venezuela could be used as a proving ground for American forces, akin to German forces used in Spanish Civil War before World War II. I don't think so, personally, Troy. Like, it's a decent theory, but I don't think so. Venezuela and the environment they're fighting in there is so different than Europe. Then I would say it can't be. Like, I think it's literally exactly what it appears to be. It's just the United States deciding to get bogged down in a war that they probably shouldn't right now, but they're choosing to do it anyway for some unknown reason to the public. So I would personally disagree. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree with Enforcer Matt on that assessment myself. But I do thank you incredibly for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one. Also, someone said, I'm sorry, I got to address this one. Bootlegger said, you guys really need to stop acting like this guy's the same as everyone else before him. Look, we don't get political on the channel. I just want to make that clear. We don't get political, so we treat everyone the same. Like, if you think he's different, that's your personal prerogative and opinion. It's a political one, but we're not getting into that on the channel. If we do that, we're literally diving straight into domestic politics full in. If you don't like the guy, that's your personal prerogative. If you like him, that's your personal prerogative here on the channel. Like, that's no one's business on this channel rather than yourself. You don't share that with anyone else. You don't share it with us. We don't share our opinions with y'all. That's how the thing's been running for 3.5 years, and that's how it's going to keep running. So if you don't like the guy, you don't like him. If you like him, you do. And that is what it is. We just chalk it up to that's a domestic political matter and nothing that we touch on air. I just want to make that a little clear. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Jeffrey Walker, who puts in a 5. He said, hey, Enforcers, and remember the good old days of railways when everyone had plenty of esteem.
Yeah, don't you remember those days? I remember those days. I don't. I wasn't alive then. But I do remember them in fondness, at least from what I read in history. And it was an interesting time, a great time. And honestly, the American economy was far better off back when the railroads were what dominated transportation. My personal 2 cents. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Nigel, who puts in a 5. He said, just remember that Putin did a performance of Blueberry Hill and LSA.
Easy last Sunday morning. But beyond that, a big thanks to you for support. That's not even Blueberry Hill, but I remember that. It was not good. It was a rough one. But still, a massive thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to none other than Smarzik, who puts in a 5 and said, didn't we build Israel?
Kind of, yeah, really. I mean, if you look at it in a certain sense, we sort of did. One thing that's interesting though, and I was thinking about this yesterday, because some people said, because I brought up the arguments that some people just hate Israel because, their reasons, and some people love Israel because they say if America doesn't support them, we'll literally crumble to dust and completely fall apart for a reason. My counter to that argument, at least the latter, is that President Eisenhower, if y'all did not know, during the 1956 Suez Crisis, openly condemned the state of Israel for attempting to annex the Sinai Peninsula and the Suez Canal because it was a part of a larger scheme by the British, French, and the Israelis to seize the canal and put it under British control again, so that way they would control the canal. They were openly condemned. And if the theory was true, that some people say, that if the U.S. ever went against an action of Israel, the U.S. literally crumbles to dust and vaporizes, how come Eisenhower did that, and then the United States is the most economically successful and militarily most powerful country on the planet 60, 70 years later? That wouldn't really make a lot of sense if that was true, because that goes against the face of that logic. I mean, like when our interests intersect, we're all for what they do. But if they start to go against our interest, and then we have to, tell them that they're not aligning with our interests and they're jeopardizing our strategic interests in the region, that's what we have to do as well, like just to make that a little bit clear. Our allies are our allies because we're working towards common interests. We don't have allies that work towards our detriment in any given situation, like, just to say that a little bit clear. But with that, a big thanks to you once again for support and helping the channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Andre Sturkula, and he said, it sounds like a free country to me. Everyone has a right to be right and wrong. And I thought that's the whole point.
And that is true. That is true. Everyone has the ability to be right or wrong, but I would say, much like our founding fathers believed, because this was a big belief of theirs, that you can be right or wrong, and there really is, especially on a lot of the prevailing issues that are some of the largest right now in the country, like abortion and gun control. There really is not a correct answer on those. That's why half of the country thinks one way about it, and that's why half of the country thinks the other way. When a lot of people talk about well-paying jobs, everyone's on board that they want more well-paying jobs and that they want the cost of groceries and everyday necessities to go down. That's something the whole country agrees on. It's just a difference of how to get to it. And there's a clear answer that the prices are high and they need to decrease. Everyone can be on board with that. But when it comes to other sorts of morality issues like gun control, abortion, and so on, you will never see that the whole country has a clear consensus on either of those. So there really isn't a right or wrong answer there. It's a matter of opinion. But beyond that, I would just wish that people would actually position their arguments from a more intelligent position, either for or against any topic, and actually speak about it more so than, like with, for example, with gun control, the gun bad, or I like my gun, come and take it. Like that's those are the two arguments you get in America. That's as detailed as they get most of the time. And I just wish it came from a much more intelligent sort of a perspective and a more well-researched one on both ends, at least a public argument on that, because at least then it would be at least intellectually engaging rather than two people who are just dug into their beliefs going at it, and it's just literally gun bad and then come and take it, and that's the two answers you get. But anyways, with that, I hope that has addressed it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, we're going to speed up a little bit here because it's 12:30 and we got a lot of chats to get to. So this one goes to 2 hot dog guys and 1 cup of snow, puts in a 5. And he said, have you seen the Michigan Central Station in Detroit since it's been restored? And I know Detroit, and it's not really so bad any longer.
I have seen it. I won't be able to show it for long here. Damn, I don't think I'll be able to show it at all. I just zoomed in on the wrong spot. But I do thank you so much for the support, and we'll try and look at that some other time, but unfortunately, we're running out of time right now, and we're starting to go overtime. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well, and we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to the only survivor who puts in a 5. And he said, FYI, Connecticut also has a gold-plated dome, and Slava Ukraine, long live the LSA from Connecticut.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support all the way from Connecticut. And I got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Anthony Wilson, who puts in a 5. And he said, the oil refinery explosion in El Segundo, and also LSA. Also, by the way, real quick, it does appear that there is footage coming out showing the initial part of the explosion. It was a very big explosion that occurred, apparently, that started the fire. So nobody knows what sparked the explosion, but I can tell you just based on that one video I looked at, whatever caused it, it was a big deal. Like, that explosion was nothing minor whatsoever. So I'll be curious to find out what started it. But Enforcer, what say you?
Fairly interesting sort of an occurrence, and we'll most likely be trying to cover that tomorrow, possibly in a short war video. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to NK Production, who puts in a 5. And he said, hello, Enforcers. As you know, Kim doesn't speak English. And if I did, please do an impersonation of me. And thanks in LSA, Slav Ukraine, and Kim loves you.
And thank you so much for the support, but unfortunately, I don't think I'd be able to do an impersonation on that. But a massive thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And also, we have a 3 from Plazoth and Dubstep Kid 801, who each put in a $3 and $2 super chat. And thank you both Plazoth and Dubstep Kid for that support. We do appreciate that. And also a big shout out to Dupper Bob, who put in a 2 as well to help keep the channel running. And we appreciate you, Dupper, as well. And we also have a 2 from Backyard Brawl Brothers, who said, what if Venezuela gets help with drones from Russia or China?
Well, that could change the situation a little bit, but we would generally doubt that they would get that sort of a support, because even if they did, it would only be support that they could use for a little while, because they would be blockaded after the U.S. got in a state of war with them, so any further resupplies would be impossible. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Jason Stork. And Jason said, my 2 cents, $2. He said, because we've been so good at it before.
And thank you so much for the support. And we're always happy to hear, folks, 2 cents. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And a big shout out to El Cacer, who put in a 2 and said, been playing AOE2, but lacking with the streams, LOL, and LSA.
And I got to thank you so much for the support. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army. And the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so a huge thanks to you once again. And we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Jack Ray, who said the Typhon missile system equals a TLAM land launcher.
And I got to thank you for the support. And we actually did talk about that a little bit earlier. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 2 from Paralith, who said, what would you rather fight, a bear or a moose? I'd rather fight a bear, honestly.
Yeah, I'd rather fight a bear. Moose are scary, and I think they're, like, impossible to deal with, really, because they're so damn tall. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And a big shout out to Adam McLean, who put in a 2 and said, I could never thank you enough for what you do.
And thank you so much for the kind words of the support, and we are massively appreciative that you enjoy the channel, a massive deal. So a huge thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Cynical Signotic, who said, West Virginia has a gold cap, and it's rather nice.
That's interesting. We'll have to try and look into that sometime, but a massive thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from 2 hot dog guys and 1 cup of snow. He said, I think you'd like the Michigan Capitol building.
I think I probably would. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, folks. We're going overtime. I would look at all of these, but we're trying to make sure that we can pace ourselves to be on air tomorrow and also make short war videos here in the future. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we're on to the next one.
And also a big shout out to Sam Crenshaw, who put in a $1 super chat, and a big shout out to you, Sam, for that support. And also a big shout out to you, Please, who puts in a 2 and said he is using Venezuela as leverage against Russia.
Oh, maybe, possibly. But a big thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And it's now time to jump away from our super chat questions and into our live chat questions proper and get our Morse code decoders of the stream. So jumping right into that, our Morse code decoders tonight were Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Arabo Garbo, Her Royal Fluffiness, Kush, Copioteryx, and Sire. And they said the Morse says, if you're wondering, is Putin crazy? The answer is yes. He's also stupid as hell too. But LLT, LSA.
And that is the sound of money. Y'all got that down on the nail. That was the Morse code message tonight. And I gotta congratulate y'all greatly for helping this channel to keep rolling and making this thing possible. And also, of course, making sure to get that Morse code message deciphered. We congratulate y'all massively. And with that, folks, it's time for us to get on into the live chat questions. But due to time constraints tonight, we're going to be getting 3 live chat questions, and then we're going to be rounding out the stream. And so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to AF Kaplan, who said, if it were up to you, how would you act against the Russian shadow tankers? Honestly, AF Kaplan, I say if they can find proof that they're launching drones, if that is indeed the case, which right now they failed to produce proof of that, then I would personally say that if they can prove it, they should maybe consider blockading those ships from going through the Baltic Sea. That's what I would personally think. Now, of course, that's a very drastic action to take. That would likely lead to a direct war with Russia. But at the same time, though, if the shadow tankers are blatant enough to launch drones at our NATO airspace, then how else are we supposed to deal with it? Just keep letting them go right up to our coast, and not do a thing about it? I'm not sure what other option we'd have at that point. So that might explain why NATO is dodging the whole thing, because they don't want to do something that drastic and then cause a war. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that if it was proved that those vessels were launching the drones, first off, they're sanctioned, so they should be seized regardless. But if they are launching the drones, then they should also be seized as well. Generally, the answer is I would start seizing the vessels. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to Miss Disa, who said tomahawks are unlikely to get to Ukraine, and how would they be better than alternatives that are available?
Tomahawks would be better because the Ukrainians will not have to manufacture them. And from what we understand, it doesn't appear there's a mass production of flamingos at the moment, and they're being produced in very small batches monthly. And the Tomahawks can be provided at least in larger numbers in the shorter term period right now. And also, they would have a farther range from what we know than the Flamingo, at least at the moment. So that would be the reasons why the Ukrainians would like to get the Tomahawks, more so than just lean entirely on the Flamingo. And it also allows for them to multiply their firepower by just having more available missiles at any given period of time, even if they are analogous to the Flamingo itself. But with that, I hope that does address that the best that we possibly can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was like the last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Ryan Kiernan. And he said, do you guys think this declaration of war on the cartels will enable the military units on the south border to use lethal force versus the cartel on the Mexican side? And it sounds like a slippery slope.
It possibly could. We would have to see how that turns out. It's a possibility, though. And that would not be the first time, actually, historically, that we have conducted armed actions in New Mexico. The first time we did that was in 1917 against Pancho Villa's cartel, if you want to call it that, or Pancho Villa's gangs of bandits, which pretty much were the old-fashioned equivalent of the cartels of today. So it wouldn't be the first time that we've done something like that, but it could be used to justify an action such as that. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I would know. And of course, that's a very tricky one to answer. But nevertheless, I do thank you all so much once again for watching tonight, because y'all have all made it to the end of tonight's stream. Crazily enough, folks, while our viewership tonight was about 1.3 thousand below what we had last night, the same number of viewers watched all the same. We once again rounded out tonight with 125,000 people having watched a stream over 2 hours, well, actually 3 hours and 37 minutes. And we also had a peak viewership of 17.7 thousand people who were here. I've got to thank you all so much for enjoying this channel tonight, because, of course, Enforcer Matt and me greatly appreciate putting on this show for y'all each and every single night. We will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world, and if there is a short war summary to be made, Enforcer Matt will be the one making it. And so with that, we will see y'all either in the short war summary tomorrow if there's enough news to be had. Also, by the way, folks, we haven't had enough news in the middle of the day, at least over the past few days, to make one. That's why we haven't had short war videos coming out. But as soon as there is enough news in the midday, we will be putting those out again as often as we can. And so with that, we will see y'all all during that short war video or during the stream tomorrow. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, Hodam Slava, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us once again. And a big shout out to the 125,000 people that were here by the very end of the stream. And also a big shout out for the 5,000 likes tonight, by the way. A massive amount of likes in the stream, and we appreciate that very, very much. But of course, we'll see you all tomorrow on the stream at 10 p.m. Eastern, and also on that short war video if there is enough news to cover. And tomorrow, I am raring to make a short war video. So hopefully there is enough news for it in some part of the world or another, because I'm raring to put it back out and to put that on a premiere if it is big enough news, of course. But with that, folks, thank you all for joining us, and of course, Slava Ukraine, Hiram Slava, get some rest, and good night.